Hello and welcome to JBR's 5th anniversary special edition episode. Before we get started, I just need to apologise because during some points of today's episode, my microphone was playing up a little bit. So you'll notice I sound a little bit distorted. So apologies for that. I'm not my usual silky smooth self when it comes to the voice recording department this time around. Through most of the interviews, it's good as gold, but some of the little bits in between are a little bit funky sounding, so apologies for that. But Chris sounds good, so that's all right. So anyway, on with the show.
Hi, this is Roger Moore, and you're listening to James Bond Radio.
Hello and welcome to James Bond Radio episode number 156. It's our 5th anniversary, everybody. We're 5 years old. Yes. My name is Tom Sears and I'm joined as always by my good buddy Mr. Chris Wright. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing really well, Tommy. And I was just trying to think back on my original 5th year anniversary of my birth date. I probably didn't even see a Bond film yet by that point. I suppose I was a bit young, 5, but think how much has changed since your 5th birthday.
Absolutely.
Up until now.
Yeah, completely. But yeah, it's 5 years in, 5 years of almost constant podcast, and we've taken little breaks here and there, obviously, but I don't even know how many hours of podcast there is to listen to. Can you imagine? Especially when we were doing the big long mammoth, like 5-hour Spy Love Me
5 hours.
Yeah. So yeah, there's if somebody can add that all up for us, it'll be interesting to know if you played JBR from episode 1 all the way through to this one, just how many hours of listening that is. Good God,
that's
man.
A lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot. Yeah, I think we probably should put a warning against everyone like advising you not to do that, because I don't think it would be very good for the old the tired eyes, tired ears even. But yeah. There we go. So what are we doing today? As always, Tommy, 5th anniversary fancast episode. What's on the cards?
So on the cards, we did a little, you did a little drawing recently, didn't you? Everybody put their name into the hat over on the website who wanted to come on and talk Bond, and you did a drawing, and we had 6 names out of the hat. So we're going to do 3 names today, 3 names next week. So on the menu today, ladies and gentlemen, we have from the bottom of the world, Cape Town, South Africa, we have Mr. Matt Raubenheimer. So he's going to be up first. Then we've got Marlene Orth from Germany, and then we also have Mr. Dave Chantry. He's I wouldn't want to say an old school Bond fan, because it might offend him a little bit. It might make him feel a bit old, but he's an interesting one because he was involved with the fan club and stuff and the convention back in the day and all that kind of business. So we've got quite an interesting batch of listeners to chat to today.
Definitely, we certainly have, and it's really good that we've got sort of quite a varied geographic location of Bond fan as well, which is pretty cool. Obviously, we like to hear from everyone sort of around the world, and I think we've got a good collection this time.
Yeah. Okay, so before we go any further, Chris, we have a rather cool announcement, don't we, to celebrate our 5th birthday? So tell the people what we got.
Okay, so this is pretty special, actually. I'm looking forward to this. So we are releasing a merchandise line.
Ooh.
Now, we've got 2 variations on the theme. The first one, obviously, the classic JBR image with our kind of nice Bond lookalike listening on his iPod. Other musical applications are available, so we've got a classic JBR image which we're going to have on a lot of stuff, but equally, Tommy, we've got a special edition.
Oh, tell me about that, Chris. That sounds exciting.
Okay, so now I'm not going to give the game away, but what I am going to say is we've got a really, really, really cool image that I'm really stoked about, that we're going to put on a couple of t-shirts, a couple of items of clothing, whatever, and it's to do with one of the films. I'm not going to say which film, but you've got a really cool image, and it's gonna look cool anyway, but for people in the know, and if you saw someone wearing this t-shirt walking down the street, you could give them a nod, and it would be like that mutual. Yeah, I know what that's.
I know what you're doing. Yeah, I know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell you what, because obviously the JBR logo is very on the nose Bond, isn't it? You look at it and it makes you think of Bond immediately. Yeah. Whereas this other little thing, you would have to know what you're talking about. It's like a little secret. It's like Count Lippy's tongue sign. If you know what the tongue sign means, you're in the club. Yeah. You know what I mean? You know what's going on there. And this will be a similar thing. So yeah, it's going to be a more understated thing. But if you know, then you know.
And I tell you what, I'm actually pretty excited to get one myself. It looks so good.
Nicely done. So when will these become available, Chris?
So they are available as of today. Ooh. So obviously today is the 8th of February, and the merchandise line, if you go to our website, jamesbondradio.com, equally we'll also, I'll put up the notifications with this episode. So on Facebook, Twitter, there'll be little links that you can go to check it out and see what you think.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah, so they'll be on quite a few different sort of various items, and it looks cool as hell.
Cool stuff. Now, they're only going to be available for a short amount of time, aren't they? We need to put a
yes,
date.
That's it. Yeah. So basically, with the campaigns, we're going to do them every now and again, but we can only do them for a certain limited amount of time. Okay. So with this one, I think we're given a 10-day period that you can put in for your orders. So you've got until the 18th of Feb. To get your orders in, and they ship worldwide. So no matter if you're in America, Australia, anywhere in Europe, South America, wherever you are, it ships worldwide. So no problems with that.
Impress your friends. Impress the opposite sex with this wonderful JBR clothing line. Absolutely good stuff. I like it. That's great.
Oh, wow. That was brilliant. Can we put that on the advert?
Let's do it. Absolutely. Good stuff. So make sure you get involved with that. So it's been a little while since we've done a T-shirt campaign and stuff, isn't it? So it'll be nice. You can freshen up your JBR wardrobe. So
lovely.
Good stuff.
Should we stick on interview number 1 with Matt and see how that goes?
Let's do it.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond.
James.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Pussy. As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Okay, we'd like to welcome our very first guest for the 5th anniversary Super Bond Bonanza birthday podcast from, well, I wouldn't say down under because that means Australia, but still down underneath in Cape Town, South Africa, Mr. Matt Raubenheimer. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Tom and Chris. It's great to be joining you. I've been listening to these birthday fan casts over the years and always putting my name in the hat, so I'm glad it's finally popped out.
Did you see the little video that we were doing, or did you just hear about it before you actually watched the video?
No, I watched the video. In fact, I was at home and my wife was next to me, and she was like, when my name came out, she did a little celebration, little excited cheer.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Yeah, no, it's great to have you on. I think we have to just say for anyone that's just listening, you've got a rather tasty James Bond poster behind you there from Majesty's, and looking very smart as well in your DJ and shirt. So we appreciate that. That's always good. Can you tell us a bit about the Bond poster? Where did you get that?
I bought a couple of James Bond posters. It's not an original poster, and it's in fact slightly smaller than full size. But I used to live with a friend who was a huge Star Wars fan, and we decided to decorate our flat with Star Wars and James Bond posters. So we each bought a few, framed them, and then put them up in our flat. I'm here in my office now at the moment, and I thought I'd bring in one of the posters just as a background decoration.
Nice. Yeah, what a good one to choose as well. For anybody just listening, it's obviously on Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's a good one. Nicely done.
Yeah.
All right then. Are you prepared for the quick fire questions, Matt? Have you done any boning up and research and thinking about what your answers are going to be, or are you just going to go in and fly by the seat of your pants?
I think I more or less know what my answers are going to be. I've heard these questions a few times over the years.
Nice. Chris, then, do you want to kick it off, mate?
Yes, I will indeed. Well, question 1 will not come as any surprise. Matt Raubenheimer, what is your favorite James Bond film?
Favorite James Bond film is From Russia with Love. It's a fairly typical answer, I suppose. I started out as a Bond fan, really into the Roger Moore films. But then, and I watched From Russia with Love very early in my sort of Bond education. And it didn't really do anything for me at the time. But when I came back to it a few years later, sort of when I was about 16 years old, I think, I really enjoyed a huge amount of things about it. Obviously, Connery is really good. I think it might be his strongest performance in the role. I love the location, especially Istanbul. I thought that was a great location for a classic spy movie. And I think in terms of the characters in that film, I think it's got one of the strongest collections of characters. It's certainly got my favorite ally for Bond in Kerim Bey. I think he's a fantastic character. I also really love Rosa Klebb as a villain. She's really memorable. That was the one thing I remembered from the first time I saw From Russia with Love when I was about 10. I remembered Rosa Klebb and I remembered the dagger in the shoe. So that really stood out to me. I think she plays that character so well. And then Red Grant is hands down my favorite henchman in the series. A huge fan of Robert Shaw. I think he's a really good actor. And in that particular role, the way he sort of is a presence in the background of the movie all the way through, just sort of like popping into influence things here and there, thinking particularly of the gypsy camp scene where he sort of saved Bond's life. And then my favorite bit of all is when Bond's on the station platform and Red Grant's following him through you can see him walking through the train. This might influence my thinking on a later question, but that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole series.
What I love about that, I mean, From Russia with Love, absolutely corking film. And like you said, in terms of the cast and the characters, outright brilliance. And you know, they've each got their motivations. You think Klebb, Grant, and everything like that, and Kerim Bey, absolutely brilliant. But what I like in that particular scene that you mentioned, a lot of the time when we watch Bond, we learn as Bond goes. So we'll see Bond doing a scene, and we're experiencing it as Bond does. But what we get in From Russia with Love, we actually get sort of from Grant's view. So we know stuff that Bond doesn't know, and that doesn't happen a lot. And when it means that Bond is in a bit of peril, or you know, the danger to come, it just adds that tension, doesn't it? That sort of, oh no, you know, something dodgy is going to happen. And like you said, like Robert Shaw is just so good. So yeah, great answer that one.
You know,
yeah, I do love the suspenseful thing.
I do think there's room for more of that in a newer Bond film, in the sense that like Bond being on the back foot a little bit. I've always liked the idea of the golden bullet showing up in The Man with the Golden Gun, but it actually being a sign that somebody's out to get Bond rather than Miss Anders playing a little bit of cheekiness. I feel like that would be really cool if like Bond doesn't know where the threat's coming from and it's just like him on the back foot until obviously all gets revealed later on. And like that thing of Red Grant stalking him through the entire movie, being that unseen presence, I think is a brilliant thing that you could totally update and do these days for a new Bond film. I really do like that idea, and it's not really been done since that I can think of anyway, apart from Electra King. I guess she's a bit there in the background, but you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something that has to be used again.
Yeah, and that's something else you mentioned about From Russia with Love, which is exactly the same as me. Back sort of in my pre-teen years, probably like 8, 9, 10, when I watched From Russia, I always thought it was a little bit, because it wasn't quite as flashy as some of the later ones, and it was perhaps a little bit slow, I didn't appreciate it. But as soon as you sort of hit your mid-teens and you see how much of a quality film it is, it definitely changes, doesn't it? It definitely sort of ramps up in the level, I think.
As time's gone by, I've definitely started to appreciate more the kind of thriller espionage type plots. And I think the plot of From Russia with Love, they did a really good job of it, because the novel itself is a great plot. But then they add that Spectre element on top of that, which gives an extra level of deception and misinformation along the way that really gives it a classic espionage feel to it.
Definitely.
Good stuff.
Nice.
Question number 2 then. What is your favourite Bond book?
There are definitely 3, 4, maybe 5 that are up there competing for a top spot. Dr. No is a big favorite of mine. Casino Royale, Moonraker, even maybe Live and Let Die. But the favorite is still From Russia with Love. I should have mentioned Majesties as well. Majesties is also a favorite. But From Russia with Love is still my favorite novel. Again, I really love the setting, the setup of it, the plot to sort of trap James Bond. I like how much you get to sort of see behind the workings of Smersh as well in the first half of the novel. And Kerim is as interesting and unique a character on the page as he is on the screen. Some of the stories that he tells, there's that one of that he kept this woman chained up under the table like a dog. That is just such a bizarre element to his character. You sort of read that today thinking, wow, you wouldn't probably put that in a novel today. But
No,
it's certainly
the days, eh? You could get away with that kind of thing in those days, not anymore. sadly.
But yeah, he's just such a cool character. His dodgy past aside.
And I think, again, with the novel, it was a really bold move not to have Bond in it for such a long period of time at the start. Obviously, they did something similar with the film, where you don't sort of see him for a decent amount of time. And that's a brave move, if you think about it. What was it, 5th novel in or something like that? And you're expecting to see Bond straight away, and yet we don't see him for a good length of time. But it doesn't matter, because, like you said, we're finding all about Smersh. We're finding out about this Grant character and how deadly he is. And I think it really works. But from Fleming's point of view, I think it was a brave and a bold move, which ultimately definitely paid off.
Yeah, for sure. And the other bold move that is also kind of unique in that novel is how he does the sort of Sherlock Holmes thing at the end, where Bond potentially could be on his way to an early grave. And we don't really know how that played out until the next novel.
Just imagine what would the world be like now if that was it. From Russia with Love, last book, 5 Bond novels, that's all they had. Like, it would be a different place from now in the Bond world.
Yeah, it would be.
Do you ever stop to think what you would be like as a human being if Bond didn't exist? Because it's such a huge part of my life and such a huge part of like me that I would feel like I'd be a completely different human being without it. Do you ever think that?
I don't think about it too much because it's kind of a scary thought just how much Bond has infiltrated every part of my life for the last 20 or so years. When I think back to my dad, who sort of introduced me to Bond, like he often says, like, what did he do that for? Like, because he had to listen to James Bond soundtracks for the rest of my childhood, basically from then on, all the time. James Bond theme playing constantly. I think it drove him mad.
That's cool. I like that.
Definitely. On to question 3 then, Matt. Who is your favourite actor to have portrayed James Bond?
Sticking with the From Russia with Love theme, Sean Connery, definitely. I think in terms of the best all-round elements of the character, I think he's got it all. He's got that kind of mean, tough element to him, slightly cruel at times, very cool in terms of his looks and the way he moves around, the way he speaks, the way he delivers some of those like classic James Bond lines. And it just has a sort of great presence on the screen that the others sort of can capture elements of, but never quite live up to, in my opinion. Although I would say that I only think he really had 3 or 4 like top level Bond films. I think his first 3 are untouchable. They're really, really almost perfect. Thunderball, so sort of like a mid-ranking Bond film for me. There's so much about it that I like, but I do find it a bit slow-paced at times. Does feel like for a film of that size and scope, they had to kind of rush it a little bit in that period when they were bringing out one Bond film a year. It kind of felt like they needed a 2-year cycle for that one, I think. And then You Only Live Twice is for a long time was actually my least favorite Bond movie, believe it or not. I used to be really harsh on it for like the sillier elements in the plot, how things make no sense. I really don't particularly like Kissy and Aki as characters very much. I don't think those actresses sort of stood up to the rest of the cast in terms of their screen presence.
Don't tell John Williams that.
I was just going to say, somebody's rolling in his grave if he wasn't still alive.
Well, lucky I'm doing this podcast and not the music one.
Yeah, definitely. That's. I think what you said about Connery as well. If people say Connery is the best and when is Connery's peak, a lot of people would say Goldfinger. I think probably half, if not more, would say Goldfinger is his peak of when he's Bond. But saying that Russia with Love, because I remember watching Dr. No recently, and he is flawless in it. First time, so people think, well, you can't be that good, but he was absolutely flawless. And again, I think From Russia is such a strong performance from Sean. And I think both of those, in a weird way, sometimes get overlooked for how good he is in those films, because Goldfinger is a classic one, the iconic one, and obviously he is amazing in that. But I think because of that, the previous 2 films where he's on point throughout sometimes get a bit overlooked. with some people. But yeah, I think he's amazing in From Russia.
I agree. Also with Dr. No, how he hit the ground running in terms of his performance and the character. Just, I think, nailed it from that first scene at the casino table where he introduces himself. The level of cool that he exudes on screen is just fantastic.
Mate, I was about to say that same thing. With Dr. No, he is just so cool in every moment. And for some, like I always think, when you think back to what a cultural explosion the 60s was, and like how whether it was music or whether it was movies, they were inventing that stuff for the first time. You know what I mean? It's like the Beatles come along and they're doing all this crazy music or whatever, and they're inventing that. It's not like they're doing, I suppose obviously influences do creep in, but like when you see Dr. No, like the first real movie of that type, I know there's probably an Alfred Hitchcock movie or two, people would say, but bollocks, it's the first one, right? And it's just that sort of magnetism he's got. And like you were saying there, that casino scene at the beginning when he introduces himself, I don't know how you get across that level of cool with so little going on. All he does is just say his name and just chats to Sylvia Trench a bit, but he's just got it oozing through his veins in that scene. And I like, if you got 100 actors to sit down and act that scene, they wouldn't be a patch on that dude. There's no way any of them would ever get any close to that moment.
No.
I think the cigarette in the mouth deserves a bit of credit as well. I think that really helps sell it.
Yeah, and it adds to the pause as well with the nice where he lights it and stuff. Definitely.
Yeah.
That
awesome.
pause is spot on. I don't know. I have never timed it, but we should to see like what's the optimal pause length for a Bond, James Bond.
Yeah.
Next question then. This is always a fun one. Mr. Matt Raubenheimer, who is your favourite Bond girl / Bond girls, if you can't choose one?
I think for me, Tracy is a definite number one. Yeah. Just because of the journey her character gets to go on in that film. It is one of my top 3 Bond movies. It's not number one, of course, but I'm a huge fan of Majesty's. And just in terms of Diana Rigg's acting talent, what she brings to the screen is really impressive. But yeah, there are others that I think are up there as well. Solitaire and Pussy Galore are 2 definite runners up. But I think for my second choice, because we've sort of got the, in inverted commas, the good Bond girl, I've got to go for Fiona Volpe as my second choice.
Very
Nice.
good choice, Matt. Very good
naughty one.
choice.
Got to have the naughty one. So, some of those scenes that she's in, I think that she's just fantastic, and I'm always amazed when she tells the story that she was going up for the role of Domino in the movie, because she's so perfect for Fiona Volpe that it's impossible to imagine her almost as Domino, or even to imagine anybody else playing Fiona Volpe.
Exactly, yeah, she totally nails it, doesn't she? Like, absolutely. Yeah, that would have been so different. I mean, if she had been Domino, and yeah, it just wouldn't. Well, I mean, she'd probably be able to pull it off, but we would have been missing so much from her portrayal as Volpe. 2 good answers there, Matt. Brilliant
Solid.
answers. Yes, definitely. Okay, on to question 5 then. What is your favourite James Bond theme song?
I think for this one, I'm going to go with The Live and Let Die.
Banger.
I'm a huge Paul McCartney fan. His Beatles stuff and everything he's done since then, basically, I'm just a huge fan of Paul McCartney. I love the arrangement of the song. It's big, it's heavy, it's got those long instrumental sections that are just so energetic. The lyrics are cool as well, and I love how that theme also finds its way throughout the score by George Martin. Obviously, that's always first prize when you can have that main title theme running through the whole soundtrack of the movie, and they did that really well with it as well.
I think that's something we've been missing. I know there was a little bit of writings on the wall in some of the Spectre sort of romantic scenes, but you think about how Goldfinger is used. You think, yeah, obviously, Live and Let Die's theme song, and I think when you can do that and you can meld aspects of the song within the movie, it elevates a movie and it elevates a theme song in return. And I think that's something that I would love to see happen a bit more in future Bonds, because it is something that I think we've been missing. Would you agree with that, guys?
I would agree. I would agree with that. I think it's so important because what we always say about John Barry stuff is that every single one of the, like, it's one thing to have the genre of a Bond score, but then every one of Barry's soundtracks is like a little sub-genre that only belongs to that film. If you think of Majesties, it has its own little flavour. If you think of Goldfinger, it has its own little flavour. Diamonds has its own little flavour, and you can instantly recognise it. And then when you look at the other films that Barry didn't do, that still has that kind of element to it, I would obviously Live and Let Die is a perfect example of that. Like that score doesn't fit anywhere except Live and Let Die, you know? And I would say there's a bit of that in Casino because you do get the score kind of like weaved in, which is lovely. And then you look at Tomorrow Never Dies as well, which is a masterpiece of a soundtrack. And you've got that, obviously it's Surrender that's kind of weaved in. So that's a little bit different, I guess. But still, it gives it that character, doesn't it? And I would say, man, it's a tough one because I do love Tomorrow Never Dies so much. But I think my award for score that's a non-Barry score has to go to Live and Let Die because he almost wrote another as good Bond theme with that string section in the song of Live and Let Die. He almost uses that as a secondary Bond theme throughout the whole movie, and it fucking works big time. I adore that tune and I adore that score.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few secondary themes that pop up a lot in that score that I think are really good. And in terms of also scores that integrate the title song throughout the score, I have to also say I love how Living Daylights has not one, not two, but three songs that are interwoven into the score. I think that's one of Barry's great achievements was coming up with three songs and then mixing them all into the soundtrack all the way through.
Definitely. And I mean, it's also with Where's Everybody Gone, it's giving Necros his own song, isn't it, basically? Yeah. And you know that whenever you're hearing that, he's going to rock up and strangle someone or you know, a fight's about to happen. And and again, it's given that little character. It's just adding that extra layer, which bit of Barry genius going on there, I think.
Love it.
Absolutely, good stuff. Question number 6 then. Which Bond location would you love to visit more than any other?
Well, I've been lucky enough to tick number 1 and number 2 off my list already.
Very
which are...
Okay, so Piz Gloria, I visited about 11 or 12 years ago.
Nice.
I booked at that stage, I spent a bit of time in the UK. And while I was there, I decided to book a skiing trip in Switzerland. Never skied before, but I thought, got to give it a try when I'm, for once, actually in a place that has snow. So I went down there, or actually went through looking through a brochure and thought, well, which one is the closest to Piz Gloria? Because I thought, well, maybe just one of the days I can sneak off and go visit Piz Gloria. So I signed up for that one, went on the trip, and then I sort of asked them, is there any chance I can sort of leave and go to Piz Gloria on my own? And they were like, no, don't worry about it. That day 4, we're going skiing there. Don't worry about that. So yeah, we went up there. Luckily, I'd had a few days to practice by then. I mean, I wasn't good at skiing by any means, but I could sort of at least do some of the easier routes by that stage. We went up in the cable car. And we skied from Berg, which you may remember is where Bond's ally is there, and he has that argument about, like, there's a sports clinic
I've
up there.
seen them advertised.
Yeah. So we used that as our base and did a whole lot of skiing around there. And then we took the cable car up to Piz Gloria to sort of go have a look around. But unfortunately, my skiing wasn't good enough to ski from Piz Gloria itself. It's a black run that looked absolutely terrifying to me. But at least I figured I'm skiing on the lower slopes, so Bond probably went past there at some stage.
He certainly did. Did you have the Majesty's theme song or any music playing, or was it just purely taking in?
I do remember listening to some of the Majesty's score when I was up there, but not while I was skiing. And then my second location that I really wanted to visit was a slightly smaller one, but that was the Prater Ferris wheel from The Living Daylights, and also one of my top 3 movies of all time, The Third Man.
Oh, yeah.
I really wanted to visit that, and again, I was on like a coach trip, and we was going to spend 2 days in Vienna. And one of the things we were supposed to do is spend an evening at the Prater amusement park, but the weather when we were there was absolutely terrible, so that got cancelled. But the next day, I said, "No, I've got to get to this Ferris wheel." So I abandoned the other people that I was traveling with and trekked across Vienna in driving rain, eventually finding the Ferris wheel and riding on it with about one other person who was brave enough to ride it in those conditions. Those cars were rocking around and banging, but it was great to tick that one off.
Did you make it stop at the top and turn out the light, or?
No, nothing like that. I was in the carriage with an old man and his dog.
Oh, there you go.
It would have been a bit awkward.
Just let it happen.
Yeah. What I love about that, though, is dedication, isn't it? A Bond fan ditching your crew, saying, right, see you later, going off through the driving rain to get to your location. And that is what we love. And that is, yeah, I absolutely adore that. Nice one, Matt.
Sure. So the location that I'd still love to visit, I think it'd have to be one of the Caribbean locations. I've always had this fascination with Jamaica, obviously because that's where the novels were written. That was where the first Bond movie was set, and obviously a few that came after that. So I think Jamaica would probably be my first choice. Go and find some of those cool Crab Key locations, like a little waterfall that runs into the ocean, and obviously would want to see Fleming's home and the little cove where he'd go snorkeling and stuff like that. But I'd also have to consider the Bahamas as well for the Thunderball locations and the few other times that Bahamas has cropped up over the years.
Yeah, there's something extra Bondy about the Caribbean and Jamaica especially. I've done the Bahamas, but I've never done Jamaica yet. And I think being able to go into Fleming's room and sit at that desk must be an electric feeling, which I've yet to do. So I think once Peace Gloria is out the way, which when we broadcast this episode, Chris and I will be making a pilgrimage to next week, basically. So we'll take that one off next week. And then I think my new number one location after Peace Gloria is done is got to be Fleming's gaff in Jamaica.
Also, something else I just thought about in terms of Bond locations, I think the older the film, so long as the location is pretty much as close as it can be, the older the film, the more kind of magical. Like, imagine seeing Dr. No's, the bauxite mine, but Dr. No's lair, and you're just like, this is from 1962 sort of thing. It just adds that extra wow factor, I think, which is pretty incredible. So on to question 007 then, Matt. What is your earliest memory of Bond?
So I was born in the year of the Living Daylights, 1987.
That's a great way of putting it. I'm going to start doing that now.
And my first memory of Bond must have been about 10 years after that, probably either late 1996 or early 97. My dad rented a video of Moonraker. So I grew up in quite a little village in KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. So it was a little bit of a semi-rural childhood. We were never really big cinema goers or anything like that. So my introduction to Bond was through watching a video. And I don't remember Bond movies being on TV at all when I was a kid here in South Africa. They came later onto TV. But anyway, so he rented this videotape, and I was not interested at all in watching that. It looked sci-fi, and sci-fi is not my thing. I'm into like World War II movies and other type of adventure films. So I wasn't at all excited about watching this film Moonraker. But anyway, popped the tape in. And it was one of those things where in 5 minutes, I was absolutely sold hook, line, and sinker because I loved the theme, the James Bond theme, the moment it came in on the gun barrel and in the free fall sequence. I loved that whole stunt sequence. It's definitely one of my top pre-title sequences. And in terms of stunt work, it's very close to the top for me in terms of Bond stunt sequences. And then the third thing that really hooked me was the character of Jaws. Always been a huge Jaws fan since then. So watched Moonraker, absolutely loved it, watched it 2 more times before we returned the tape. And then the next time we went to go and rent a James Bond video, I was hunting the shelves, looking at the back of all the tapes to see if there's any others that had Jaws on them. And then I spotted Spy Who Loved Me, saw Jaws. So I thought, well, going to get that one, watch that one. And then, of course, from there, just continual exploring of the series. The first Bond movie, I didn't see a Bond movie in the cinema, though, until Die Another Day, funny enough. Ooh. So I remember Tomorrow Never Dies coming out because I saw promotional stuff for it on the TV. I remember seeing a little behind the scenes thing, and I was definitely already a Bond fan by then because I was definitely interested in it, but didn't catch that until it came out on video. And then The World Is Not Enough. I had a plan to go and watch it with my uncle, but then ended up cancelling on him because my other uncle was taking me to go and buy a new cricket bat. So as a 13-year-old, I was wanting that cricket bat. So I missed The World Is Not Enough in the cinema, and then finally got to see a Bond movie in the cinema. Unfortunately, it was Die Another Day. Although at the time, I actually didn't mind it. I was still coming of age as a Bond fan, so to speak. So the more outlandish elements of Die Another Day didn't bother me too much. I was a huge Pierce fan, and there was enough things about that movie that I liked to sort of. It was a satisfying first Bond cinema experience for sure.
Nice. I tell you what, man, we've said it before, and I think it bears repeating, that if you're going to introduce a kid to the world of Bond, you can do a lot worse than either The Spy Who Loved Me or Moonraker. I think those two in particular are the perfect entry point for a kid to introduce him. Not for me personally, because I was such a little weakling that Jaws terrified me too much, and I couldn't watch those two films until I was about 20. But like for a normal kid, I think that's a perfect place to start.
I do wonder sometimes, actually, if I would have become such a big Bond fan if I hadn't seen Moonraker first. If I'd seen one of the more gritty, down-to-earth... If I'd seen From Russia with Love first, I probably would have seen it and been, okay, that was all right. But I might not have been that excited to go and find more Bond movies.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about timing. I think if it gets you at the right time, with the right film, with the right actor playing Bond, then the fire, you light the touch paper and away you go. You're hooked forever. I think, yeah. I mean, if you'd have been shown I don't know. Yeah, I mean, From Russia with Love is your favorite now, but imagine if that was the first one at that age, it might have just been this boring film to you in those days. Do you know what I mean? And not ignited that in you. And then if you'd have watched Moonraker years later, maybe the time wouldn't have been right, and you'd have gone off in a completely different direction. Oh, I get scared thinking about things like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. All right, then, final quick-fire question, which is, what would you like to see from Bond 25?
Well, this is an interesting one. I've never been big on speculating on what might happen in the future of Bond. I tend to prefer just sitting back and waiting to see what they kind of serve up. But I have always said that when Bond movies are at their best, it's usually when they're taking a lot from the source material in terms of the books. So I'd really like to see them draw as much as they can from the books. I really enjoyed that they drew on Colonel Sun a little bit in Spectre. So I'd love to see them go further down that road, bringing in ideas. Obviously, we've got the Shatterhand story, which they could draw on, and I would like to see them do that. Who knows if that's even a possibility anymore. But yeah, I just love to see as much drawn from the literary character as possible. I think the way Daniel Craig was set up as Bond, it was an adaptation of one of the best James Bond novels, and a really good adaptation at that. So I think sending him off on another really strong film, really rooted in the source of Bond in terms of the books, is what I'd like to see.
Were there any sort of books or any sort of storylines in particular? It doesn't even have to be Fleming. How would you consider, Gardner or Benson or any of those sort of taking information from some of those novels?
I have been a huge Gardner fan for a long time. I actually started my book Bond journey. I think I read 0-10, so I started with Benson, and then from then I read quite a few Gardners. For some reason, in my library where I grew up, there was a bunch of Gardner. There wasn't any Fleming apart from The Man with the Golden Gun. So actually that ended up being the first Fleming book that I read, and I was disappointed by it. So yeah, I do have a love for Gardner. And one of my favorites is actually Nobody Lives Forever.
What a title. What a title.
That is my favorite Gardner book. When I read that as a kid, I haven't read it since, actually. I absolutely adored that one. Yeah, nice choice.
So he has the book itself.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Nice.
First edition cover. I really like that.
That's beautiful.
So I was actually re-looking at it recently and thinking it could actually fit quite nicely into the current sort of story arc that Daniel's Bond is on, because basically the plot is engineered by the head of Spectre, who I think is Tamil Rahani in that series. I can't quite remember the name of the head of Spectre, but he's sort of, I think he's on his deathbed, and like his dying wish is that somebody should kill James Bond. And they sort of, Spectre kind of set up this competition almost, where assassins are almost competing to be the one that sort of puts James Bond's head on a silver platter for the head of Spectre. So I think with Blofeld having been captured at the end of the last film, he could maybe like get a message out to the sort of broader Spectre network that they want Bond, he wants Bond killed, and like who's going to be big enough to kind of take him out. So in the story, I think it's May and Moneypenny are kidnapped. Obviously, we don't have May in the movies, but Moneypenny and, I don't know, maybe Tanner could get kidnapped. And they're kind of the bait that lures Bond on this journey across, I think it's France and maybe further into Europe. And all the way, well, he's on this journey, he's sort of being attacked by these assassins who's sort of trying to claim the bounty for killing Bond on behalf of the head of Spectre. And then at the end of the book, it also has a section where Bond sort of swims out to this island where the head of Spectre, or sort of like a Spectre headquarters or something like that, I can't quite remember, but it's very reminiscent of the scene in Live and Let Die where Bond scuba dives out to Mr. Big's location. So you could almost bring in an unused bit of Live and Let Die as well in that sort of underwater scuba scene, which is something I'd love to see from Daniel, is underwater scuba diving.
You've inspired me. I'm going to reread
I am
that.
hooked.
I
am absolutely
what
hooked.
did we say at the beginning of this? We said,
Exactly.
wouldn't that be
I know.
cool if you had Bond on the back foot? And that's the story waiting to happen right there.
So you've got like half a dozen Red Grants, but obviously each with their own different skill set and different approach to how they're going to get Bond. Oh, I mean, that would make such a good film, wouldn't it? It has to be done at some point. And like you said, this is perfect time for it as well.
They'd obviously have to update the book quite a lot and build on it like they did with Casino Royale, but I'm sure there's definitely, as the bones of a story, it's got a lot of potential. And I think part of the thing that sort of makes the Bond movies these days take so long to come out is that they have to come up with a new storyline every time. Whereas I think they do have a bit of a catalogue of usable storylines. I think also of High Time to Kill by Raymond Benson. I think that's another one that has potential as a future Bond film. So obviously they've got to want to go and delve into the continuation novels, and obviously there's a hint of that in Spectre. So maybe that's a clue that it's something they might be willing to do in future. But I'd certainly love to see that.
Wow,
that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because that Colonel Sun moment in Spectre is the first time they've done that, isn't it? And it's kind of like it does, because I would have said, never in a million years would they touch anything that isn't Fleming in the films. And the fact that they've crossed that bridge in however small a way that was tells me, okay, those doors aren't firmly closed. They might be ajar a little bit, even only a little bit. But then, because there's some great titles in there, man, over the years. Like there's, I think Never Dream of Dying is an amazing title from Benson. And like, even if you didn't, you would obviously want to tweak the stories and stuff because the tone of, Fleming to Gardner to Benson to the latest crop of all the different writers and stuff is so massively different. You'd have to obviously do a good amount of work on it, but the seeds of the ideas are in there, man. And I mean, dude, Nobody Lives Forever. I think A, that's a great title, and B, perfect story for Bond 25. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We best get on the phone. Few quick script rewrites.
I'll text Babs. I'll text her.
All right. Amazing. Well, there we are, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Our first interview for the Fancast episode. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it's been a great experience to chat with you guys. It's obviously something that I've hoped to do one day with over the years, listening to these episodes. And yeah, it's an absolute thrill to chat to you guys today.
And our first interviewee from South Africa, I believe. So that's fantastic.
Well, hopefully one of these days we'll have some James Bond locations in South Africa that you guys can come and visit.
Oh, there we go. I was thinking Bond 25, Bond 26. South Africa's got so many cool areas that could potentially be used. So, yeah.
That is it's a very Bondian place as well. It's because it's outstandingly beautiful. And I feel like there's a lot of places I think Bond shouldn't perhaps go to, but in the rest of the world, I mean, I for some reason, I just don't think Bond would fit in Australia for some reason. I don't know why that is. I just don't feel like that's a Bond style location. South Africa, man, particularly Cape Town, I think that's an absolute 100% dead cert for a future spot for Bond, I think.
And there's a film studio in Cape Town that lots of international productions come and shoot at. So there's set space that they can build sets. Yeah, there's loads of locations. I think it would work.
I will send Babs another text after the first
And you could be our inside roving reporter from South Africa to get all the juicy details when they start shooting there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good
Nice.
stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, buddy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
No worries. Take care, Matt. Cheers. Bye.
So there we have it. Nice to hear from Matt there. I always appreciate it when the listeners, get into a bit of costume for Bond. There he is with his DJ on and stuff, getting dressed up. Made more of an effort than we did. Absolutely.
Yeah, nice one, Matt. And equally, totally on point about South Africa. Obviously, you were there recently, but I mean that'd be a great location for a future Bond, wouldn't it?
It would. I think Cape Town. A lot of people are terrified of Cape Town, and me and the missus were one of them, because when we said we were going there, so many people, even experienced travelers, were like, "Ooh, fucking no, you don't want to go down there, mate. You're going to get shot in the face or whatever." And we were a bit nervous going down there. And then once we got there, we were like, actually, it's all right. Obviously, it's got its problems and stuff, and it's there's a lot of crime there, but it's in very concentrated areas. So it's kind of like most places. You don't go to the dodgy areas of anywhere really, as long as you kind of stay away and keep your wits about you. You're absolutely fine. And it must be said, it is one of the most beautiful places I have ever been to in all my life. You've got Table Mountain up there just looking at you from every angle you are. You've got and
that's iconic, isn't it?
It
you
is,
could definitely see that involved in a Bond film.
100%. And then you go out into wine country and stuff, and you've got vineyards everywhere. It's just absolutely outstandingly beautiful, and it's one of those places where Bond would fit in like a glove. It's absolutely Bond country for sure.
There was supposedly that visit to South Africa in diamonds in the film, but that was shot in Nevada, wasn't it, in the desert rather than South Africa with Winton Kid. But so he technically, within the film, he supposedly has been there. Well, not Bond, but it has supposedly been shot there. But obviously, it wasn't done for real. So to actually get there for real would be great.
There's actually a hotel there as well in Cape Town that we stayed in one night called the Belmond Mount Nelson, and it's like a posh place like that Winston Churchill stayed in back in the day. John Lennon stayed there back in the day, and all that kind of stuff. It's been there for probably a couple of 100 years, I would have thought, and that's where Bond would stay if he went to Cape Town for sure. So they've already got that. They've already got that bit sorted. I'll
imagine if he ends up in your room.
That'd be lovely. Yeah, we can turn the tables this time. You can stay in my room. Yeah, cool stuff. Wicked. So thanks to Matt for joining us. Good stuff. Cool. So shall we move on to the next interview, Chris? Who have we got?
Yep. So next up we have is Marlena Orth from Munich in Germany.
Let's have a chat to Marlena.
Hello and welcome to the second guest of our James Bond Radio 5th anniversary fancast episode. It's Marlena Orth from Munich in Germany. How are you doing, Marlena?
I am very well, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad at all. And what are you up to today, aside from talking to James Bond Radio?
Not much. We have a little game night planned with our neighbors. Not very exciting, except for this interview. So, quiet weekend.
Very nice. I have to say, whenever you've phoned in a question or whatever to the podcast and stuff, you always sound very bright and happy and chirpy, and that's always a lovely thing. And to meet you via Skype, I can see that carries through into your everyday life. So it's lovely to speak to somebody who's so bright and happy and chirpy.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. I'm a happy person.
Good. That's good. We need more of those people.
That's what we like.
Good stuff. All right, then. Are you ready to face the 8 quick-fire questions that we've got for you? Are you prepared?
Yes.
All right. Good stuff. First one, then. Question number 1, Marlena Orth. What is your favourite James Bond film?
It's For Your Eyes Only.
Oh, all right. We don't hear that one too often. So talk to us about that. What is it about For Your Eyes Only that you like?
So it's a Roger Bond, and I'm all for Roger as as James Bond, and it's got so many iconic scenes with BB the Ice Skater and Lynn Holly Johnson, who you've interviewed, and the one of the best ski chases in the series, obviously rivaled by Majesty's, but one of the best definitely up there, and the super iconic car chase in the yellow Citroën. and everything. And and Christatos dragging Bond and Marlena through the water behind the boat. Yeah, so it's and of course that super corny ending with the parrot talking to the prime minister, and you have Maggie Thatcher in there, and yes, and you have all this Bond goodness wrapped up in one movie, and I just love it. Yeah, wow.
It's a great one. There,
That's a stellar review.
I think For Your Eyes Only is like obviously taking it back down to earth for Roger after Moonraker in a more serious film, but it was almost like at the very end there, they were like, right, we've been a bit too serious now, so let's just put something ridiculous in at the end, just to raise a smile or a groan for some people just before we finish. Yeah, just before the credits.
I think it's kind of bookends it a little bit, because the pre-titles is a little bit sort of that way as well, isn't it? A bit fantastic with the old Blofeld, sort of Blofeld alike in the wheelchair. But that's an interesting choice. So is it obviously the storyline, the action, and you like your Roger, and although it is serious, there are still a few lighter moments in the film. But is there any sort of scene within that film that really stands out for you?
I would have to go with definitely the ski chase. And if you know everything that was going on behind the scenes while they were filming it as well, you just appreciate it so much more. Like they had the stunt guy being dragged by the actual Bob, right? So they had a rope or something between him and because the bobsleigh was going way too fast for the stuntman to follow, and then who was it who talked to the stunt guy saying, you wouldn't consider being tied to the actual bobsleigh, and you said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea."
I tell you what, I love.
That's just what they do.
I love about those old Bond stunt guys is just how day to day that stuff is to them, and it's like, oh well, something went wrong and I nearly died, but that was all right. I just got on with the job at hand, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, man, it's. I love how just they don't care. They just jump in and do the most ridiculous things, and it's just not a hair out of place.
That was all Ville Borg. It was. He did all the filming for Her Majesty's as well, and down a ski run, filming on skis down a bobsled run is just crazy. Do you ski yourself, Marlena?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think you can get the appreciation more if you know what they're doing and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cracking. Okay, so on to question 2 then. Marlene Orth, what is your favourite James Bond book?
It's Thunderball.
Nice.
It's a good one.
Okay, and what is it about Thunderball that really does it for you?
It's the classic Bond. So we have this plot. We have a race against time, and you have to find some atomic weapons that have been stolen by Spectre, and you're in the Bahamas, and it's all this exotic Bond location stuff going on, and yes. And you have a great villain. I think Largo is, he's Blofeld's right-hand man, I suppose. So, so it's very exciting, and you really feel his menace as well in what he's doing. Very cool and calculating. And I really like the Jason Isaacs audiobook that he's recently recorded. Yeah, so he does Domino and Largo really, really well, and great fun to listen.
I haven't heard that one yet. Have you, Tom?
I've not. I've got it. I've got them all queued up on my Audible account, and I kind of jump in every so often when it's time for some Bond. But I haven't got to that one yet. No.
Nice one. Well, Thunderball was a great one, and I guess like that is the classic kind of villain storyline. If you went to the average person in the street and say, what does a villain want to do, in a James Bond film, it would be steal a couple of nukes, threaten the world, for a massive ransom. That is the classic
exactly.
plot, isn't it? Yeah.
So how deep on the books do you go then, Marlena? Have you read all the Flemings, and do you go into the Gardners and the Bensons and all that kind of stuff, or how do you go with that?
I read all the Fleming books, and I'm not that, or shall we say, I haven't gotten quite around to the continuation novels yet, except for the Young Bond books. So I read those when I was younger.
Very nice.
And all the Flemings, but none of the Gardner ones so far. Although I do have them also queued up on my Kindle, so one of these days I'm going to get around to reading them.
One of these days, absolutely.
What was your opinion on the Young Bonds? Did you enjoy them, and did you have a favourite out of the Young Bond series?
I remember liking them a lot, and they were great, really well written for maybe younger readers.
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed them a lot, and it was still Bond, but it was more maybe even more relatable because he was still going to school and but still solving cases and mysteries. So yeah, it was really nice.
I tell you
enjoyed them a lot.
what, they were written well for older people as well, because I poured through those young Bond books like a man possessed. I absolutely adored them. Blood Fever, I think, was my favourite one of Higson's. Do you remember there's that sequence at the beginning when he joins the Danger Society and they're sneaking around on the rooftops?
Oh, the Danger Society!
I love that sequence. It's such a good book. It's a good book designed for kids, and I'm getting just as much enjoyment as any kid would ever. And I'm in my 30s, but hey ho.
You know what though? I was just thinking, if that book had come out when I was sort of in school, the very next day I'll be like selecting my few sort of close mates and being like, right, we are so going to be the Danger Society. We're going to climb up onto the school roof over there. We're going to run and jump off that. I mean, that would have definitely happened for sure.
That sounds right up your street, mate. I don't like to jump around as much as you do. I like to stay firmly on the ground, so I probably wouldn't make the cut.
In fact, is it too late to start a new Danger Society with JBR members?
I think we should.
So, next question then, number 3. Who is your favourite James Bond actor?
As if we didn't know.
Yes, it's Sir Roger.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it when people say that, because most people say Sean or Tim or whatever, but or even Daniel these days. But I like somebody who's unabashedly a Roger fan. So talk to me about that. What is it about Sir Roger that you like so much?
Yes, 100%. It's his humor, and he brings. I feel like he plays the role with the same air of cheekiness as the character itself has, and I quite like that. And his films are so much fun to watch, and yes, he's a great Bond, and whenever anyone asks me, that's what I'll say. Although I do love the others, and as many of your listeners have said before, it is like picking your favorite child or something. But I have to go with Sir Roger.
You know what?
Closely followed by Pierce.
Oh, okay,
Nice.
all right, cool. I like that too. See, do you know what? I for me personally, I think as much as I love Majesties is obviously my favourite film, and Casino Royale is my very close second. And as much as I think like the first 4 Connerys are totally untouchable, perfect Bond films pretty much.
Yeah.
For me personally, I think Roger's movies have the most replay value. Like I find myself watching Roger more than I do any other Bond. I don't really know why that is. Maybe just because I love him. But like I often, when it's time to sit down and watch a Bond, I often find myself reaching for a Roger rather than anybody else.
I'm the same as well.
Do the same.
And I guess with Roger, he obviously he's got 7 films, so there's a few more to choose than others. But you just know you're gonna feel really good afterwards when you watch a Roger. You just can't help but smile. And he has got a range in terms of, obviously he's got the really out there ones with your Moonrakers and stuff, but then he's got your down to earths. And and I think it's the same with me. Every time you want to watch a Bond film, okay, it might be some of the early Sean, and if it's not an early Sean, it is going to be a Roger pretty much most of the time. And I think it's one that you can they're thoroughly entertaining, the Roger films, aren't they? You can just sit there and just feel warmth when you're watching it. Like, I guess, yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Pierce then. If Pierce is your closely followed runner-up, what is it about Pierce that you like?
I grew up with Pierce, or I grew up watching Pierce's movies. Yes, so whenever I think of Bond, I do think of Pierce maybe first, and then of everyone else. Yeah. And yes, and when I read the books, I also picture someone between Pierce Brosnan and the drawing of the comic books. Yeah, okay. Which I used to own. I'm not entirely sure where they are anymore, probably in my parents' basement somewhere in a storage box. But yeah.
And I guess with Pierce as well, he's probably the closest to Sir Roger out of the other actors who have portrayed Bond in terms of the lightness of touch. He brings a bit more humour to it as well, doesn't it? And a bit of cheekiness. and the suave
Yes.
factor. I think Roger and Piers probably had the most suaveness going. Obviously, you got Connery, but that's kind of a different type of thing. I think Connery is just sort of cool, but Roger and Piers both definitely have the suave factor. Yeah.
Do you know what? That is something I really miss, man. I really do. I love Daniel, of course I do. But like, obviously, going through Tomorrow Never Dies recently and GoldenEye and revisiting those, there's something about that flippancy, that super smooth, suave flippancy that I just really miss. You know, Daniel's as much as I love Casino and how, you know, hard he is and all the rest of it, I really miss that. Just that real cockiness that's missing, I think, these days. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get that in Bond 26 onwards, but
Absolutely.
we'll see. So on to question 4 then, Marlena. Who is your favourite James Bond girl?
Now that's difficult, but I'm gonna go with Pam Bouvier because I think she's very underrated as a Bond girl.
Nice.
But she's great. She's an army pilot. She gets a lot done in this movie, and she helps Bond a lot. She drives a truck and flies a plane, and just helps Bond a lot, and is very, very strong character. And I love that scene when they're in the bar.
Yeah.
And she says, he's with me, so don't mess with him.
I do like that, you know. It's fun when you get those characters like we often say that about Holly Goodhead, don't we, in Moonraker, Chris, how she's like level pegging with Bond all the way and stuff. And even after they sleep together, Bond sneaks out, and then as soon as the door closes, her eyes are open and she's off doing exactly the same thing. I think with Pam, I do like the fact that there's that little power struggle between them, like you say, in the bar, and she kind of saves his skin and he thinks he saved her skin and all the rest of it. And then they get down south and he's like, it's a man's world. Why can't you be my executive secretary and all that kind of stuff? I do.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff, man. It's so good.
Yeah. Here's some money. Buy yourself some decent clothes. It's like, it's harsh. But yeah, it's a good one.
Good
Pam
stuff.
Bouvier, have we had that before?
Do you know what? I
I'm
was
not sure
just
if we have.
thinking that. I don't know. Did Brian Dobson say that was his favourite Bond girl?
He maybe. I think it might have come up before, yeah, because and there's that little air of mystery about her as well. Initially, obviously, when we see her with Felix Leiter at his wedding, and Bond doesn't quite know who she is, and he thinks, asked Felix what it's about, and he said strictly business, and then later on finds out like she's part of the CIA. So you do get that bit of mystery with her, and I think that's a really solid choice, actually. Excellent stuff. What is your opinion? The one thing I would say, what's your opinion at the very end of the film when they go to that sort of party and she sees Bond kissing Lupe, or Lupe kissing Bond, I should say, and then she gets a bit teary-eyed, but then obviously he leaps over into the pool, and then they get together afterwards. But she's cracking character, I think.
Yeah, that scene is a bit unnecessary. I think that might just take a little bit away from her character, or from the strong character that they've established beforehand. But I mean, yeah, I might do it differently, but I also see why they went that way. He's James Bond, and he's supposed to be so desirable that even kissing another woman is.
I get that a lot.
Not
so
too much
you know.
for her, but makes her sad or something. Yeah.
I tell you what, though, in her defense, I think at the end of that film, they kind of like screwed a lot of characters over, like the whole thing with Felix being all happy and chirpy after he wakes up in hospital and he's like, "Hi James, how's it going?" The winking fish. I feel like the little sort of tying up the loose ends at the end, I think they maybe went slightly in the wrong direction with those people. So in Pam's defense, other than that, she's a bit of a badass, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, and my number 2 and 3 would be Triple X and Camille.
Ooh, nice.
In terms of Bond girls.
Very nice.
Again, both solid characters, both great characters. Actually, Triple X. Again, they're both. It's interesting. So with Triple X, you've got that sort of trying to one up each other, which is quite good. And Camille, I think, is kind of a bit of a sort of different to the other Bond girl characters. Obviously, they don't sleep together. There's that mutual respect, and they're each got their goal that they're trying to achieve. And you know that they probably would be attracted to each other, but that isn't the point at the moment. The point is to achieve what they're trying to set out to do, knowing that they can help each other. And I think that's a really, really sort of nice characterization with Camille. The good chemistry there as well.
Yeah, they're both very strong, and they both help each other on on their respective missions and share, well, maybe not secrets, but I guess intimate aspects of their lives. So there is a very, very strong connection between them, even though maybe it's not sexual in that movie, but yeah, it's still a very strong relationship between the two characters.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Question number 5 then. What is your favorite Bond theme song?
That's difficult because GoldenEye.
Oh, that is
Yes.
a beauty. Good stuff. Talk to me about that. What is it about GoldenEye that you like?
It's this sexy vibe of a Bond song, and it's just got everything you want in a Bond song. And it always, I think, if you ask me what's your favorite Bond song or Bond theme tune, I always think of the the title sequence as well. So the title sequence goes together with the song, I think, and the way they depicted the end of the Cold War, and you have the silhouettes of the women, this sort of chiseling away from the Soviet statues, and I love everything about it. Although, Tom, I have to say, I don't mind the middle of the road 80s pop songs at all. So I do quite like For Your Eyes Only as well.
Nice.
But, yes. I might sing along it very loudly from time to time.
I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it. I love a bit of that as well, man. That little sort of the tail end of the Roger period, For Your Eyes Only, you've got All Time High. All of those tunes banging as far as I'm concerned. They might be a bit middle of the road 80s pop, but I still love them. Yeah.
Yeah, so middle of the road 80s pop, count me in. But yeah, if I'm asked to choose a favorite Bond theme, then it's GoldenEye.
Beautiful.
There's one thing that I think with GoldenEye, which would have been brilliant if they'd used the theme song more within the soundtrack of that film, because it's such a good theme song. There's so many nice bits to it, and I love that all you need is 4 notes, dun 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 dun, and that's all you need, and the rest of the song just plays in your head. You just need those 4 notes, and I think that could have been interwoven into the film, and that would have just elevated that film even to a higher plane if that had happened. But yeah, absolutely brilliant song. Love it.
It makes me want to move my hips in a really inappropriate way, that song. As soon as it comes in, you know what I mean? It's just got
I think you were doing that when I did the old 4 note there, Tom.
I was. That's what made me think of it.
Okay, so on to question 6. What Bond location would you most like to visit, Marlena?
James Bond Island. Yes. Because it looks, whenever I see a picture of the mushroom-shaped rock, I do see this thing coming out of it, like the 2 panels that catch the sunlight, and I feel like I can see it there, even though on the picture, of course, it's not, and it makes me think of Roger and exotic locations and his face up against Germanny.
You know what? It's just down the road. I'm in Thailand at the moment, and it's just down the road from me. It's about 30 minutes away from where I am right now. And I tell you what, I think
so jealous. I'm so jealous.
I really. So for me, I think Peace Gloria has always been my number 1 location that I've always wanted to go to, purely because it's a great spot and Majesty's being my favorite film. But I think that island is such a magical place. And when I went for the first time, I was on the tour boat going along and stuff. And just as you're kind of like cruising along amongst all the other islands, which are amazingly beautiful as well, you just instantly, you're just in the film, because it just looks exactly like it does, and you're picturing Bond in his seaplane flying through the islands and stuff. And that's kind of like how you get there, just on a boat, in between all those islands. And man, that when you stand on that beach and you look at that, something as simple as that mushroom rock, it just transports you straight into the film. So you've got, it's an absolute, I insist that you go sometime as soon as you are able, book a flight and go and check it out, because it is such a magical spot, that one. I would say Peace Gloria is number 1 for me, but I'd say that's almost like joint first position, that location, because it's so magical.
What would you say to, obviously in the film when they used it, it was a model shots for when they had the antenna, but do you think they should stick an actual solar panel antenna on top of the real mushroom-shaped rock? What do you think, Tommy? Would that go down well or not?
100%. Well, the problem is with that is that there's nothing really on the island at all. There's nothing to read. There's nothing even tells you what Bond film it's from. So most people, what they do is they do the boat tours, and say you'll see signs everywhere saying James Bond Island Boat Tour, but that's not the only thing you go and see. They take you through loads of other things and stuff, and it's a great day out. But James Bond Island, they leave you there for like, oh man, I think it might have even been 20 minutes. It wasn't long at all. It was like, it was 30 minutes tops. So most people get off and they mill around and they go, it was in a Bond film, and there's nothing to say like anything other than that. There's no, like, you should at least have images from the film on like little plaques or whatever, just so you can see, or something like that. But there's nothing to read, no nothing. And you could totally develop that place a little bit more and just make it more of a Bondian shrine. It's called James Bond Island, for crying out loud. So it's like, you know what I mean? There's extra there. But then at the same time, when you go there, aside from the little stalls on the beach, it's identical to the film. So it's kind of like, you almost kind of might not want that if you're a hardcore fan. I don't know. But yeah, definitely worth the trip.
So, living in Germany, Marlena, have you been to any of the Bond locations in Hamburg or Munich or anything like that, or any of the Berlin? Sorry, any of the locations there?
Yes, yeah. So I have been to the ones in Hamburg, and I actually went there with Ralph. So thank you.
Hey, nice.
For putting me in touch with him, and big shout out to Ralph, who after we got in touch, he invited me up to Hamburg to see a James Bond show, I suppose, in the new Philharmonic in Hamburg, and it was great. It was amazing, and I still tell people about it because it was so great. And then we spent the day going around Hamburg and visiting the Atlantic Hotel and the car park where they shot the car chase from Tomorrow Never Dies, and all. It was great. Yes.
Oh, sweet.
Awesome.
That's a good spot, the Atlantic Hotel. I've not made it to Hamburg yet. I went to Berlin last year and did some of the Octopussy stuff, which was great. But Hamburg is definitely on the list. Go and see what Carver had going on in Hamburg. Yeah.
When they shot Octopussy in Berlin, it was obviously still the Cold War, and they had to move that sign, right? You're leaving the American sector. They had to move that actually a couple of meters into the west so they could drive by it, because they weren't allowed to drive by the actual border. Yeah. So that's there's so much history in Berlin, and it's a great place to visit, not just for Bond locations, obviously, but also just in general, because you get a bit of that Cold War vibe.
Big time. Yeah, I was there. I think it was like 2 days, and I wish I had like a week or two to explore that, because obviously there's so much history there. But it was, aside from the Bond stuff, which is obviously priority number one, there was like the Spy Museum. Did you go to the Spy Museum when you were there?
No, not yet.
Spy Museum was cool. I really enjoyed that. They had some Bond stuff in there. And and obviously all the World War II stuff is just so fascinating. And just like you say, the Cold War and the Checkpoint Charlie and all that kind of stuff is so interesting. Yes.
Yeah. I remember visiting Berlin with school when I was maybe 15 or something, and we went to the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, and they had a picture of Roger up there. And I remember saying to my classmates, "Oh, they shot Octopussy here," and they were like, "That a James Bond movie?" And I'm like, "Yes, see him, he's playing James Bond." And
that is a
awesome.
Beautiful thing, which leads me into the next question, which is, like, where did it all start for you with Bonding? Like, what's your earliest memory, and what sort of lit that fuse to turn you into a Bond super freak like us?
To be honest, my memory on that is a bit hazy. I'm not entirely 100% sure anymore of how I got so obsessed with James Bond. But I remember, or I have this very hazy memory of watching GoldenEye on TV, and then getting into the Pierce Brosnan movies, and then sort of getting into all the other movies and the books and the comics and and everything there is.
Nice. So it wasn't like a case of, a lot of people say it was like their dad put on a Bond film for them at some point, and that was like somebody introduced them to Bond. So it was just a natural thing for you. It was just out there and you happened to watch it, and that was it.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm definitely the the biggest freak in my family. So my
That's a beautiful thing. So how when you were like proper became a fan, then how old would you say you would have been?
Maybe around 12, 13, 14.
Nice.
Good
So
age
the walls in my room were essentially the whole wallpaper were just James Bond posters.
Yeah.
All the movies on my shelf and all the books, and yes.
That is
And
so
I
cool.
even made a James Bond Monopoly when I was maybe 13 or 14, and I actually checked last night to see whether there was an actual one, like an official one that they made. And they made one in, I think 2006 was the first one they released, and I made one in 2004 or 5, maybe.
Ahead of the curve.
Just
I like it.
Yes.
Nice. Very nice.
Sorry, so the different colors were movies, and then within every color or within every section, I would have a location from the movies that you could buy as property on the Monopoly board.
Please tell me you still have it. Do you still have it?
Yeah, I know. We've got to have a game.
Yes, it is. It's somewhere at my parents' place. I actually asked my mom about it sometime this week, but
What
she
did
said
you
she would take it up for me.
What did you have as the little icons? I guess a martini glass, a PPK, a DB5, or what did you have? You know, the little counters that you can move around the board.
Oh, actually, for those, I just used my sister's actual Monopoly game.
Oh, yeah.
Because I poured so much work into making this board. So a lot of it is drawn by hand and everything.
That's amazing.
And,
you've got to take a photo and put it on the JBR page. Has to be done.
I will.
Beautiful. I look forward to that. That looks great.
Yeah. So I don't know, the 4 stations I think are Q's lab and M's office and Moneypenny's office and Downing Street number 10, and then and the utilities are a casino and bar, and then what is it called? Community chest, and then the other one is
Chance.
Oh, Chance, right?
Yeah.
So as I said, my sister had an actual Monopoly game, and I basically copied that and made it James Bondian. So whenever it said something like, you know how you pick up a card and then it says you have to pay so and so many euros or pounds or whatever, and then I would make it Bondian, say the cost for the dinner with Magda is on you, along with the champagne or something like that.
This sounds even way better than the official Bond Monopoly, man. Yeah. I've got that in storage back home, the Bond Monopoly, but I want to play this edition. I think we need to schedule a trip over to Germany. We'll get Ralph involved, and we'll do some Marlena Monopoly Bond style. I like it.
That is amazing. So, quick question that I thought about. What do your friends think of your obsession with Bond? Do they kind of roll their eyes whenever you talk about it, or can you get other people interested in it? What are their sort of thoughts on having a mate who's well into Bond?
I think when I was growing up, it was a bit more difficult to convince people, so people would roll their eyes at me maybe a bit more. But now I would say now it's easier to convince people. So my best friend and I from uni, we went to London, and I dragged her to all the Bond locations, and and she said that it was fun, but the most boring thing about it was Ian Fleming's house, because it didn't even have a placard saying here. I don't know. The author of the James Bond novels used to live here. But it was a great day, and yes, and it was the same friend that I drove to Glen Etive with for the Skyfall shot, and I mean, she was such a great friend. She even took a picture of me standing there like Daniel, and you have the car in the shot just on the edge just a little bit, and it was pouring down. It was proper Scottish weather. It was terrible. And then she said, she took like 20 pictures or something, and then she said, okay, we're done here now.
Do you know, it's a beautiful thing, because a lot of us freaks, we often have somebody in our life who isn't a Bond fan, but has to be dragged along to all the Bondian things. Obviously, my good lady Catherine is my version of that, long suffering, and I drag her to all sorts of places that, you know, she's not got any interest in or whatever. So I think we need to give a shout out to your best mate there, and a shout out to all of those people who are listening, who have a friend or a significant other who puts up with all of our nonsense and comes along for trips like that. It's, you know, we salute you.
Yes, absolutely.
Good
And yeah, she for my last birthday, she even ordered James Bond cupcakes for me. So they had those. So there were 6 cupcakes, and I don't know, one of them had dice on it, the other one had playing cards, and one had Walther, and one just said 007, and it was really sweet. Yeah.
Awesome.
You sound like lovely, mate. So on to the very final quickfire question then, Marlena. Bond 25, Valentine's Day next year. When you go into the cinema to see it, what are you hoping to see out of Bond 25?
I was afraid you might ask that question. I think that's a difficult one to answer. Maybe I can start with what I don't want them to do. I think especially now that they changed directors, I think they would need a solid idea of what to do with Madeleine. I'd rather have them not have Madeleine in there than a Tracy knockoff, sort of. And I think it would take a lot of effort and a lot of good ideas to turn her to have her in there and not go down the slippery slope of maybe having a Tracy leaning story of sorts. Yeah. So
that is a tough challenge, because obviously it's not been officially confirmed, but that's the kind of the strong rumor. And it was the fellow on, I think it's the Daily Express, that leaked it, and he's typically right, that guy, old Baz. So I feel like she's going to be in Bond 25. I feel like I believe that story, but it is a difficult one, isn't it? Like, what do you do? Because I feel like I don't think anybody believes she's going to survive this one. Like, she's got to go at some point, I think. But then how do you do that? Like, I suppose the key thing is the marriage, isn't it? It's like if Bond gets married in Bond 25, I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't want him to be honest.
I don't think they'll get married. They can't get married, can they? No.
I don't know. But then that's what makes Tracy so special and such a poignant thing, is the fact that she was Bond's wife. So it's kind of like, if she's just still his random girlfriend, I suppose that's still powerful, but it's not as powerful as if, I don't know, maybe they get engaged or something and it doesn't actually get to the wedding. Maybe that's more palatable. I don't know. But even then, I'm not sure I'm happy with it.
So, Marlena, if Madeleine is in Bond 25 and you had a choice that she gets bumped off in the pre-title sequence, halfway through, or at the end of the film, what would you opt for? This is the power in your hands now.
Yes. Probably the pre-title sequence, because I don't want their story to be the defining story of the entire movie. So that's a difficult question.
It is a difficult one. I'm really curious to see how they play it, because it is a difficult one. It's like, how do you play that? So I suppose a good question would be, what did you think of Spectre? Like, what was that, a thumbs up from you, or a thumbs down, or in between?
Absolutely, thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, so a lot of the criticisms, aside from the Blofeld brothers story, that a lot of people said is they didn't sort of really believe the romance between, Bond and Madeleine. So, what is that? Why you're not so keen on that? Are you in that camp, or were you okay with that?
No, I believe the romance. I just didn't believe that she was that important to him.
Yeah.
Were important enough to be a second Tracy, basically, or for them to get married. And yes, so she's a great character, and I definitely think both of them have chemistry, and I find their relationship definitely believable. It's just that I don't want a second Tracy.
You know what though, right? If she's coming back, how can you not have Christoph Waltz in there as well?
Well, this is what I was about to say. Yeah, Blofeld has to be in it.
Do you think they're because they tried to pull a sneaky with him last time, didn't they? They were like, he's what's his face? Name's gone out of my head. Oberhauser. He's not Blofeld. He's not Blofeld. And then, of course, I remember we got spoiled on that when we were on the red carpet for the premiere, and David Williams was interviewing him, and he was like, "You're Blofeld, aren't you?" And he's like, no, but he could kind of tell that the cat was out of the bag, and we're like, damn it, I wish I hadn't heard that. But we all expected it anyway. So maybe they're trying to do that sneaky thing right by being extra sneaky, by sneaking him into the film with nobody knowing about it and actually pulling it off. Whether that's true or whether they could actually realistically pull it off in this day and age is another story.
That would be very difficult,
wouldn't it?
They would actually need to turn into secret agents first to be able to pull out.
That's true.
So okay, so that's what you don't want from Bond 25. So have you got any ideas for what you do want?
I want that Blofeld story to be maybe not entirely wrapped up, but I want this whole brother thing maybe closed in a way. Like obviously there will never be a scene where Bond kills off Blofeld or anything, but maybe we can sort of move on from that aspect. Yes,
they could probably do the film without even referring to that aspect at all, and just have Bond and Blofeld as enemies, and just don't mention anything to do with that whole thing in all of Bond 25. And it wouldn't seem weird if they did that.
I think they would have to.
That's true.
I don't think there is anybody in the world who saw Spectrum. Do you know what I really liked about that? The fact that they did the stepbrother storyline. I really like that. I don't think anybody did, not one person. So I feel like they have to know that firstly, and then secondly, that I think if Blofeld does make an appearance, or maybe he's just spoken about and you never see him but he's off screen, they have to just completely sweep that one under the carpet, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll see how it goes.
All right, yeah, not long now. I mean, look at it. We're in early February now, and they're going to start shoot. Is it first week of March they start shooting?
4th of March, yeah.
4th of March. Oh my goodness! So we're going to get the press conference soon. We're going to get the title of the film. We're going to get the cast. Oh man, it's all going to start unfolding.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
We're going to have to do. I think we should do like last year. We had a bit of an online community going when they revealed the name of Spectre. So I think we should try and do the same. Obviously, time depending around the world, and try and get as many of the JBR lot online at the same time for the revealing, and just I think that would be good fun if you're up for that.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
100%. Good stuff.
When Spectre came out, did you guys read the leaked scripts at all? I don't quite remember.
After the film, we did, yeah. So there was an opportunity to read it beforehand, but neither Tom or I were up for doing that just because of the spoiler side of things. Yes. But afterwards, we did a little review of it, didn't we? And there were certain things that were in the leaked script which actually would have worked in the film, I think, and we were a bit of a shame that they weren't included. And then there are other things that you can see why they changed. But it's a question we ask ourselves all the time. If you had the script of Bond 25 sat like next to you, unopened, but there was an opportunity that you could read it and it wouldn't matter, or would you hold off and not know anything? What would you do then, Marlena, if you had the script of Bond 25?
I think I would try not to read it. So I would definitely set out on trying not to read it. But I think if it actually just sat around in my living room and I had the opportunity to read it, I would have to endure some serious internal struggle, especially as more news kept pouring in. It would be more and more difficult to resist, but I think I would definitely try, because I think it would only spoil the movie experience, and you don't want to know what's going to happen before you go and see it.
Yeah, do you know what? I had a copy of Spectre's script on my computer before the film came out when the leak happened, and I remember opening the document and seeing the front page, seeing the title of the film and all the rest of it, and I just sat there staring at it for 20 minutes, being like, "Shit, I can't do this, but I want to see this." And I was like, "Shall I just open the first page and just see what?" No, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I just,
it's like taking the first bite of chocolate.
Yeah,
it's better if you just don't.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. So that was my temptation last time, but always to not spoil it is the overriding power in my mind. Like, as much as I would love to see it, I know myself, and I know I would sit down to watch that film and I'd be a bit disappointed that I knew the gist of what was going to happen. I need to go in as cold as possible. It's tough these days, man, because like in previous years, like especially you, Chris, I remember when I first met Chris and they played an unseen clip from Quantum just before it came out, and he had his eyes closed and didn't watch any of it. And I did watch that. It was only a little minor clip, but there's something to be said for like not watching anything, no trailers, no rumors, no nothing, and going into a Bond film totally cold. Like you with Skyfall, even Chris, you didn't even listen to the song, did you, beforehand? And it's like there's something to be said for that, but at the same time, it's like especially when trailers come out and stuff, it's hard to say no to that, isn't it?
It is. I think not watching the trailer or not listening to the song, that I couldn't do.
Yeah, same.
I think I would have to, and I want to, because there's such a long time in between movies. You do want some new Bond something in your life, and that's a way to get it.
100%.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about rounds out today's interview. Thanks for joining us. How was that for you? Did you enjoy yourself?
I did. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually still a bit nervous, but thank you so much for having me. Oh, that's good. That's good. But yeah, I wanted to thank you guys so much for all this effort and love that you pour into the podcast, and also, of course, to Dan and JW and Matthew, the newest recruit, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes, so thank you, all of you, for doing such amazing work, and it's so much fun to listen every week, and yes, and I think I speak for everyone. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for saying that. That's lovely.
That's the reason why we do it is to for when we hear stuff like that, and it sort of gets us excited to do the next one, doesn't it, Tom?
It does indeed, and it's important, I think, because a lot of us are quite lonely in our affections for Bond, and it's good to know that there are other lunatics out there as well who share the same obsessions.
Absolutely,
so it's a little community, a little family, a JBR family, obviously, that we can all kind of look out for each other and share the love a bit, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited to play Marlena Monopoly. I mean, I can't wait for that.
Oh, that has to happen. If you ever make it along to a JBR meetup at some time, Marlena, you've got to bring your Monopoly board with you, because I want to see it, and B, I want to play it.
Yeah. I'll definitely take a picture of everything when I'm home next time.
Cool.
All right. Nice one. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on board, Marlena. Been a pleasure. And hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. See you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Isn't Marlena an absolute ray of sunshine?
Oh, mate, you can't help but smile when you speak to her. 'Cause she's just so bubbly and fun. And you know how sometimes you say the world would be a better place if everyone was like Roger? It's the same with Marlena.
Yeah.
If everyone was like Marlena, the world would be a better place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
It's nice to be, chat to somebody so chirpy and positive and happy and bouncy. It's
And
good.
who loves a Bond as well. I mean, obviously, big fan of Roger, which is brilliant. But I loved when she was going into the whole Monopoly and the effort that she went into, man. And changing all the community chest and chants and every single sort of, location around the board.
Yeah.
I want to play that. I want to play that now.
I want to play that now as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Like all those kinds of things that you did when you were a kid and stuff, like when you were really into something and you like, I remember making board games and stuff back in the day and writing books and stuff and all that kind of stuff. And it was just, I would love to kind of like stumble across that. It's probably all long gone now. God knows where it would even be, but to kind of stumble across something like that you made when you were younger and super passionate. But yeah, we've
particularly Bond related.
Exactly, particularly Bond related. I remember writing a report once of like, what would your ideal job be? And we had to write an essay on what your ideal job would be. my ideal job was James Bond. I remember writing this big old thing about it. Yeah, I remember it was actually pasted up in the corridor at school. Actually, along everybody's was. It wasn't because mine was particularly special, but I remember it was up there on the wall outside the English department there. What I'd give to read that again today, I bet that would be hilarious.
And me too, man. Me too.
Absolutely, cool stuff. Well, thank you to Marlena again for joining us. Hopefully, she can make it along to a JBR meetup and we can bust out some Monopoly. And old Ralphie Babe's got a shout out as well, didn't he?
Yeah, definitely did. So shout out to Ralph again, and maybe get both of them over for a bit of a JBR meetup next time.
Absolutely.
Great.
Good stuff. Cool. So we shall move on to our final interview of the day, which is your fellow Wales inhabitant, Mr. Dave Chantry.
This is it, our Brummie in Wales. Let's have a chat to good old Dave. Here we go.
Okay, we'd just like to welcome our third guest for the 5th anniversary birthday podcast, Mr. Dave Chantry. How's it going, Dave?
Hey guys, how you both doing?
Very well, thanks, buddy. You're a man that goes way back in terms of Bond fandom, isn't it? I've seen pictures of you involved in old fan conventions. I've seen you way back in the day involved in all sorts of stuff, wearing matching T-shirts with old Mark Ashby and all that stuff. So it's going to be an interesting chat today, this one, I think.
Jurassic Bond, we call it.
I nearly called him Old Man Ashby then, didn't I, by mistake? That's going to be my new name for him.
He wouldn't be happy about that one. I saw him last week at the Where Eagles Dare showing, and he passes on his regards. So.
Oh, that's good.
Very nice.
Yeah. Grumpy Man Ashby, there we go.
He hasn't changed. He's been like that for the last 30 years. So.
Okay. Nice. So what we're going to do then, we'll hit the normal quick-fire questions and basically delve into what it is that you like about Bond. Obviously, we can see behind you there, big indie poster is a big Raiders poster. Is indie your number one sort of film and franchise and stuff like that, and then Bond's not far behind, or how does it work?
I think historically Bond's been my love. Most of my friends. Bond related, I've known for a lot of years. The fellow Jurassic Park, the Jurassic Bond people. Indie's something that it's funny when Raiders came. Whenever a Bond film comes out in the cinema, I won't watch another film while it's out in the cinema. So in '81, when For Your Eyes Only came out, everybody told me about Raiders of the Lost Ark and this great film and great action adventure, and I refused to watch it because For Your Eyes Only was in the cinema. And then about the October, it was still in the cinema, Raiders was. So I went to see it, and I was just blown away by it. And for me, it's my favourite film of all time. You guys obviously know from the Facebook, I put the hat on every now and again and stick an indie film on. But no, Bond's my favourite. Bond's my love. Certainly the older ones. I only ever tend to rewatch the ones from the 60s. If I'm going to put one on, I'll stick one on from the 60s. And I think since the 60s, there's only Casino Royale that's actually reached that peak of, it's the only one that touches that quality. There's been a lot of good and a lot of bad. So, I think we all know the good ones. We all know the bad ones.
Interesting.
Diversity.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be an interesting chat, this one. I'm excited to get stuck in. Yeah. All right, cool.
Well, let's start with the first question then. Out of them all, if you had to choose one, what would you say is your favourite Bond film?
I can answer that, but I'll answer differently first. Ever since I started making lists up of favourite Bond films, I've had 3 in the top 3. And they've always fluctuated. And the 3 being From Russia with Love, Thunderball, and Unmentioned Secret Service. Depending on how I feel, depends on which one's number 1 or, where it is. But I think I'm resigned to the fact now, From Russia with Love is definitely the best Bond film there is. And it was on ITV last week, and like I said, I don't usually watch it, but I turned it on and sat down in the lounge, and I've got 2 kids, so it was like, guys, go and play for a bit. I'm going to watch this. I need a bit of Connery. I need a bit of From Russia with Love. It's for me, it's the ultimate Bond film. Not just the film itself. It's my favourite Bond book as well. So
it's you've just done 2 questions in one go there. Like, nice work. I think
sorry, guys.
There's always that thing, isn't there? When a Bond film was on TV, there's just that pull, isn't it? It's like no matter how many times you've seen it, the fact that it's sitting on your shelf on a Blu-ray and in your iTunes library or whatever, if it's on TV, you're like, let me just watch 5 minutes of this, and then 2 hours later you're still sitting there.
Yeah. You know
crazy.
what I think that is, though? Yeah, I think that is harking back to the days where we didn't have them on DVD. You know, we might have had them on VHS, but whenever it was on TV, it was an event, and it was like, man, we have to catch this. And you kind of get that nostalgia when it's on TV a bit, I think, still these days. But yeah.
I'm that old. I remember that when we used to, the fan club produced some, back in the early 80s, they produced some audio cassettes. And what they did is we used to share them around every time we met up. And you just stick a tape in and listen to the audio for 2 hours because the films weren't available. How crazy is that, eh?
Yeah.
It's bonkers. But yeah, I mean, I think they were big events. From Russia with Love, when it first came on the telly, I'm not even going to hazard a guess at the year. It was around 76 or something. But it was an event. You know, I think it was probably the first one I actually saw. I missed Dr. No when it first came on the TV. You know, it's obviously probably butchered, pan and scan, and you know, and you just watch them. You take them from the TV. I used to when videos first came out, I'd take them all off the TV, and my mum and dad would be they'd be watching something on the TV, and I'd just walk in the lounge and stick a Bond film on the television. They hated me.
Right. It's so funny that, isn't it? That when you think back to those times, and for me when I was growing up, it was the only way I could get Bond was either if I taped them on TV or I'd subscribe to one of those things where it's like you pay £10 a month, you get the first 4 Bond films, then the £10 a month you get one VHS mailed to you a month, and I did that through the whole collection up to GoldenEye, and yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how that the accessibility of Bond is to the point now where it's just built into your television. You just stream it straight off the bat, and it's just whenever you want. Whereas in those days, it's like you just didn't have that access. So it's like that. Obviously, the tape and the audio and stuff was a little bit before my time. But the further you go back, the harder it was to get them. And I forget which film it was now, but one of the Roger films had, when it was on TV, had like the biggest audience of all time for a TV showing or something. It might have been Man with Gone Gun, or it might have been Moonraker, or one of those.
No, it was Live and Let Die.
Was it Live and Let Die?
Oh, was it Live and Let Die?
Yeah, Live and Let Die, yeah. It was something like 23 million, which is ridiculous.
That is crazy, isn't it?
When you compare that to viewing figures these days, obviously there's so much more choice, so it's like it's understandable. But can you imagine 23 million people all sitting down to watch a Bond film at the same time on TV?
That's basically a third of the UK population, pretty much. Yeah. Which is bonkers, and they were big. They were big events, you know. And then we used to have the double bills back in the 70s. It's funny, growing up, Bond wasn't trendy, you know. When I grew up, all my friends they played football, and I played football too. But admitting that you were a James Bond fan was just not. It was just not trendy. So basically, you kept it quiet, and then about in '82. I was walking past a local comic shop called Nostalgia and Comics in Birmingham, and I'm living in Wales now, but obviously from the accent you can tell I'm not from Wales. And I saw an advert for the James Bond fan club, and I didn't realise such a thing existed. You know, I didn't realise there were other sad buggers like me. You know, so I joined, and we used to meet up, and the people that I used to meet up with, Mike Caulfield, Ian Davis. Steve Carty. We still get together today. We go to the premieres together when we can. You know, it's become a 35, 40-year obsession, you know.
Yeah.
And let's say today I've got children, but I still, you know, I listen to podcasts, and I listen to you guys. I listen to you guys, and the only other podcast I listen to is the one that Tom Zielinski does when they go through each film. You know, and it's good. It's nice to see such a passion, and it's nice to see such a but Bond's still living it. So it's not.
I guess nowadays, obviously, that accessibility means that people can share the obsession. And like you said, it's not just the one person. There are other people out there. In fact, way more people than most people would realise are into it. And this is a way that we can all connect. I was just wondering, actually, obviously you've seen Bond loads in the cinema. What was your first Bond cinema experience?
Spy Loved Me, 1977. And I snuck in.
Seriously?
Yeah, I snuck in, and I almost missed the first 10 minutes because I kept looking over my shoulder.
Amazing. You owe Sir Roger £3 or whatever it would have been in those days.
depends, I think. No, a friend of mine had already seen it, and he kept going on about this character called Jaws, and I'd already seen Jaws the film at the cinema, and it was a little bit confusing. I think I was 10 years old, and we went to the local cinema in a place called Selly Oak, big flea pit, ABC cinema, and that bit, the parachute jump at the beginning, it was like, wow, I'd heard of Bond before. I think I've probably seen From Russia with Love, but none of the others. But I saw it and I was like, wow. And then from then it was the good thing about those days is that you'd watch the main release in the summer, and then later on in that summer or the next summer they'd have the double bills. So it's quite easy in the cinema to catch up with the Roger films. In the cinema, I sort of missed most of the. I've seen all the Connery ones on the cinema now, but less so then. But yeah, what an amazing event! Spy Love Me. You can't really pick a better film to go and see at the cinema as your first. But my favorite event was actually Moonraker, because I built up the anticipation because it was 2 years later, and I'd seen The Spy Loved Me, and I thought, well, I bought some of the books. I started to read them, and then I anticipated Moonraker coming out, and we went to see it on the coast, because obviously in those days, if you were, they tend to be released in London and then around the coast. And I went to see it when I was in Polzeath on a school trip in summer of '79.
On a school trip.
A school trip, yeah. And it was a camping holiday for a week, and I didn't really do stuff like that. We didn't really have money in those days, but it was an event because it was a big old cinema, stall, circle, like Royal Box or whatever, and and it was just such a great film to see in the cinema. I'm not saying it's a great film, but it's a great film. It's just not a great Bond film, but to see it in the cinema is magical.
Wow. Absolutely.
But yeah, Spy Love Me, it's probably Roger's best, and I know there's.
Absolutely. Cool stuff. Yeah. So next question then, you already mentioned From Russia with Love is your favourite Bond book. So how deep do you go on the books with Fleming and stuff? Have you gone through all the continuation books as well? Do you go all the way down the line with it? What's the story with that?
Yeah, so I've read the books multiple times. I occasionally listen to the audio books now when I'm going for a run or doing something. I used to buy I bought all the John Gardners and I read them, but they sort of right at the end. I think it was cold. I think I sort of lost they sort of became repetitive, and then Raymond obviously took over, and I read a couple of the non-film versions. I never saw the point in reading a film version when the film was out. Yeah. Less time. But yeah, I read the continuation novels now, and the last two by Anthony Horowitz. I think they're pretty spot on. If I was to, I'm actually these days more of a book Bond advocate than a movie Bond. I love the books. I love everything about the books, and it's the books and the soundtracks that are Bond to me. The films themselves, half the time I can take it or leave it.
Interesting.
What about here's a question then. Obviously, you mentioned the last two Anthony Horowitz books, both of which Tom and I are fans of. Particularly, I think Forever and a Day.
Oh, Forever and a Day. Just to cut you off for a second there, Chris.
Yeah.
Forever and a Day blows my mind. I've always loved Colonel Sun, and I've always said that's the best continuation book. And I read Forever and a Day, and literally I'm getting chills with every passing chapter. And I think that might be my new best continuation. I think it beats Colonel Sun for me. If not, it's right up there alongside it. I fucking love that book. Anyway, you can carry on now. I've said my bit.
Yeah, well, basically, I was going to say, what would your opinions be of film versions of those, of the Anthony Horowitz books? Do you think that would work, or are you happy just to keep them as books and nothing more?
I'd like to go back to period Bond. I really would like them to do a film noir. From Russia with Love is probably the nearest that there is on film. I'd love to do a film noir Bond back to the beginning. That would be super.
So when you say that, right, does that mean you would want to go back to the original world of Fleming in the 50s, or would you want to go like swinging 60s sort of Goldfinger? Sort of. What is your thoughts on that?
60s. I love The Man from U.N.C.L.E. the movie. I thought it was I don't have the baggage of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. From a lot of people do. So I've got no complaints about it. I thought it was a fabulous film, set in the 60s. It was superb. What I loved about it, the one bit I liked about that Man from U.N.C.L.E. film that really made me smile was the fact when he was driving the truck and he needed to get in touch with the guy, he couldn't because there's no mobile phones. It's there's no technology. It was like shit. What do I do? The one thing I really, really don't like about the Bond films today, although I accept that they can't really get away from it, is this bloody Scooby Gang mentality where Bond does something, he has to pick up the phone or he has to use this, and I work in technology, so good for it, but I don't like it. I'd rather they went back to spying, and he likes Sneaky Bond. I love Sneaky Bond.
Yeah.
That's interesting, right? Because I feel like there is something to be said, like when you read about the SOE during the war and stuff, and the back in the days of the proper Cold War when it was smuggling people across borders and divided Germany and all that kind of stuff. There is something, especially during World War II, it's such a romantic time. And it's not like I always say, I went to the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. a few years back, and it takes you through the whole history of spying, way back to like ancient Japan with ninjas, all through to the current day. And obviously ninjas are always cool, as we found out recently with the scuba ninjas. But like as you go through time, it was like World War II was like by far the best bit, and the Cold War immediately after that was so interesting with the little hidden gadgets that they dream up and stuff. Obviously, it's like exactly the birthing ground of Bond in there. And then you get through to the modern day, and it's just all computer hacking, and it's all just fucking boring. I'm like, this is so dull. And it's like when you take away all that technology and you just go back to Bond pulling out a hair and putting it across his cupboard and talcum powder across his briefcase, there's something so cool about that, and it's interesting. So I get it. I could definitely be on board with period Bond again. What I'm curious about here is you've said quite a lot now that you're a bit take it or leave it with the films, and that when you go back to watch Bond, it's typically just the 60s ones. So most people, I would say that at the moment with Daniel, we're in like a bit of a golden era of Bond again, where it's come back and it's respected again, and it's not, maybe like it was in the Pierce or the Roger period. People would be like, oh, that's Bond, that's silly, that's for kids or whatever. But I get the feeling that you don't feel that, aside from maybe Casino Royale. So what is it about the latest crop of movies that you're not a fan of?
I don't know. I like Skyfall. It's funny. Daniel Craig as a James Bond, he's fabulous. I came out of Casino Royale, and I just blew me away. I was fortunate to be at the premiere, so I actually met Daniel at the premiere for that. Nice. On the way down the stairs, on the way in. So God, that man was nervous. But
you or him?
No, he was. I shook his hand, and he was sweaty as anything, and he was really nervous.
Really? What did you say to him? What was the exchange?
No, I just said a few friends have seen the film. I'm sure you're going to be fine. I've heard it's brilliant. I'll let you know in about 3 hours. And he was like, "Thank you very much," but he was just about to walk down the stairs to face the press for the first time. Outside the Odeon. And I love him as James Bond, but I think he's got a 50% hit ratio. I love Casino Royale. I love Skyfall. It's funny. Most people that I know who are non-Bond fans love Skyfall. I don't know why. Quantum of Solace. I thought Daniel looked good, but it gives me a headache watching it. Just the editing just gives me a headache. And then Spectre. I thought if they'd have finished Spectre just after the Blofeld, if they'd have made the ending like Dr. No, like it looked with Blofeld's lair, and ended it there, I could have lived with that. But they tagged that half an hour Scooby Gang down the Thames, and it just lost it for me. I didn't, I thought it had the best opening of any Bond film. I love the opening, the one shot, and and then they spoiled it by that stupid helicopter stunt, the CGI helicopter. So it was just a case of trying to do too much. But I think as a James Bond, Daniel Craig's really reinvented the series, and I can see why they're doing another one with him, even though he's the first James Bond that's younger than me, but only by
Interesting.
So let's see.
Yeah, I think we said that. I think everyone's probably in agreement that with Spectre, that last chunk of the film is the sort of weak link there. And I've always said, ultimately, that crater base was really cool. And I feel like if you'd have done a You Only Live Twice ending, bunch of ninjas on the top of that crater base, big old gunfight, dudes in overalls in different colours, I feel like that would have been the way to end that film, I think.
I think even a Doctor No type ending, it was sort of set up like like Doctor No. The last 20 minutes of Doctor No and that scene is very, very similar. I just think they tried to overdo it. I thought they wasted the snow scene. Come on, I don't want to see a broken plane gliding down the ice. I want to see Bond on skis. I want to see another On Her Majesty's Secret Service chase. But I understand why they have to reinvent them. So there's something about Bond on skis. You just gotta love it. So
absolutely.
So you're a massive fan of the 60s Bond, and you mentioned your respect for Daniel there. If you had to choose one, who would you say is your favourite actor to have portrayed Bond?
No problem. Roger was my Bond. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I often have an argument with Mr. Ashby about about Roger Moore, because he's not a fan of the Roger Moore Bond. But for me, they were the Bonds that I grew up with, and as a man, he was just. I met him a few times. He was lovely. He was what a lovely man. It's funny. I have the argument with Mark about You Only Live Twice versus The Spy Loved Me, and I always say The Spy Loved Me is the better version of Then You Only Live Twice. And that was his first. This was Spy was my first. So. But I think they've all got their merits. I mean, Brosnan gets a lot of stick these days, but I went to that all-nighter in the Prince Charles last year, I think it. And I don't know whether it was just tiredness, but Daylights came on and it just seemed tired. But as soon as GoldenEye came on, it was like, wow, when you watch Daylights and then you watch GoldenEye straight one after the other, you realise that he did a good job, and he takes a lot of crap, and so he should for that debacle that was Die Another Day. But he was good. He reinvented the series when it needed it, because those 6 years between License to Kill and GoldenEye, as a Bond fan, it was like, wow, it was poor, It was, and those were the days when the British film industry were, it was some of the films that came out. It was pretty going for the dumps. And when we went to the convention at Pinewood in '91, I think, even walking around Pinewood, you could see it was on its knees. So it's lovely to see the film industry these days getting back up. And I'm not a big fan of walking around Pinewood and by police guard these days, but it was more accessible then. But it's nice to see. And we went on the Batman set was up, and it was they'd saved it because they were going to film the second Batman there originally. So the set was up, so we went on the set and we were walking around the set. It was the Alien set Alien 3 was being built in the 007 stage. It was. But the film industry was on its knees just because of the economy and the risk.
Those days, man, when you could just, you walk around Pinewood these days, obviously, and they do a very short, much shorter tour when you go to Bond Stars, because of obviously Star Wars is booked it solid for the next God knows how many years, and it's like you're not allowed within 100 feet of anything Star Wars. Whereas back in the day, obviously pre-internet, not everybody is carrying a camera in their pocket that they can publish anything at all. It's just you get your photos developed at home, and that's as far as those photos would ever go. So it's understandable that everything's under lock and key these days. But man, back then it must have been so cool to just. I remember I forget his name now, but he put some photos up on our Facebook a while ago of him just stumbling on them filming The Living Daylights, and he's just there. He is next to Tim, like taking photos and stuff. I'm like, fuck, man, I wish it was like that these days still.
Yeah, it's Pinewood's a strange place now. It's sort of like I like the events, and I go to the occasional one. I don't go to them all, but I go to the ones I can go to now. But it just doesn't seem. It sort of takes away from the event then, because the whole point of going to Pinewood is to have a walk around, to have a look, go down Goldfinger Alley. Even though they've done it 100 million times before. Yeah. And Dave Worrell's famous walk around the tour around the back lot. It's just not the same anymore. It's not. I don't. I enjoy going, and I enjoy going to meet people. But you sort of these days you're sort of confined to the room and the gardens, and the rest of it. If you're lucky, you might get a little bit of a bit of a walk around. I mean, that the convention in 1990 was brilliant because that was the first time all of the props were put on show, and we helped put the props out and then put the props away on the Monday.
Now I've seen photos of this. And I think you need to sort of just let people know the actual type of props you had, because the number and the actual props you had were insane. And these were just dumped in a warehouse, weren't they? And you had to kind of like catalogue them all.
Well, Graham was doing all that. I just helped. I just helped put them on the Monday. I stayed behind to help catalogue and put them away. They didn't know what they were. You had everything there. You had you had one of the jets from Octopussy, and on the Friday we had a little bit of because the event didn't open until the Saturday. On the Friday when we were there, we made good use of all the sets, sitting in Little Nelly and sitting in the jet, and they had the mock-up fuselage from The Living Daylights, the cockpit, Tracy's grey. All of these things, it was just everything that you see now at the Bond in Motion exhibition was there. They just didn't know what they had. It was crazy. It was a great event. It was probably the best event that I've been to. No disrespect to Gareth and the boys, but that was special. That event, it was a. The thing I miss most about Pinewood Mind is the when people turn up in their tuxedos for a day event, and we're sort of having a photo take and go. Just with the people, and that's before iPhones. This was when we used to have to develop the cameras.
Nice.
So going on to the next question then, Dave. This one is sometimes a bit tricky for some people, but if you had to choose, who would you say is your favourite Bond girl?
Is this to marry or is this to...
You've got two choices. You can have the one to marry, the one to settle down with, the one to take home to show your mum, and you can also have the one that's
on the side.
A bit on the side, the naughty mistress, the one that you gets your blood going.
I have to say this quietly. I have a thing about Gemma Atherton.
Oh, nice. Strawberry Fields. Taste like strawberries.
She's my dirty bitch Bond. my favourite Bond girl is Domino. She's what a stunning. I'm not saying I want to marry her too. Maybe a threesome.
Do you know what? Do you know what? Most people are very polite when they answer that question, and I love you've just gone full on. You've just gone exactly what's on your mind. You've just laid it out there. I salute you for that, man. Good work.
Yeah. If anything, I'm always one to say what's on my mind.
Maybe we need to rephrase the quickfire questions and say, okay, so which Bond girl would you like to marry, and which girl is your dirty bitch Bond, and we can attribute to that to Bond girl. We can attribute. There's just something about her. As for Mary, I don't know. I got a lovely wife. I can't think about that.
Okay. Just have two mistresses on the side. That's enough.
Yeah. Exactly. That is enough as well.
Beautiful stuff. What about when it comes to music? Then, what's your favourite theme song / score when it comes to Bond?
Oh, so it's so hard to pick one. It just is. I've got a thing about the same as everybody of Barry. I love Barry's Bond. I actually get more enjoyment out of the soundtracks now because obviously I work from home quite a lot. So I'm doing this. I've got the headphones on and I'm listening to a bit of Barry. Nice. I think Barry's best soundtrack is You Only Live Twice. It's a wonderful. I don't like that film. Don't get me wrong, but the soundtrack is. It's wonderful.
There are levels of genius, aren't there? There are things that are amazing. Like if you listen to any Barry score, really, but like you listen to something like Goldfinger, that's such an iconic score, and it's brilliant. Then you look at something like Majesties, and then you look at something like You Only Live Twice, and just that one string line from the song is so otherworldly genius. It's so far above genius. You can have a genius and then you've got a genius that's on a whole different level than other geniuses, and that one string line there I think is just better than anything I've ever heard. It's just so amazing.
It It is, and I think my favourite soundtrack is probably Thunderball. But I think the best, that's just a sneaky Bond soundtrack. It's just the whole you listen to, and it's very reminiscent of the Ipcrest file, which he did around the same time, and they're just that's a fabulous soundtrack as well. I actually like Skyfall as a theme tune. When that came out, I was belting that out as loud as I could in my singing it at the top of my lungs with my noise reduction headphones, which by the way are charging because I've got to put these ones on. But Skyfall, what a belter of a tune! The one after was probably the pole opposite of Skyfall.
So okay, on to question 6, and Dave, what Bond location would you most like to visit? And also, what's the one that you visited that you like the most?
That's easy. Peace Gloria, Chiltern. I went there in 2009 with the boys I spoke about earlier. We did a trip out there. We sort of did we drove on the Friday. We did the Chiltern on the Saturday, and then we actually went down to the GoldenEye Dam and driving around on the Sunday. Every Bond fan, it's just like it. Well, you guys are all going again in June. Unfortunately, I can't leave the family for that amount of time, so. I work away quite a lot, so to come home at the weekends and then leave, it's not something I try not to do anyway. But yeah, Peace Gloria, Chiltern. You can go up there, and it's funny. When we drove down there, we took the Her Majesty's Secret Service CD and we played it literally from the moment we landed to the moment we took off again to come back home. And I don't think I've actually listened to it since. I got that sick of it. But you just had to do it. You just had to play the CD on loop for the whole of the time, for the 4 days. But yeah, it's definitely, it's probably the one remaining location. I've been to Jamaica a few times, but and I know Martin and his gang do the tracks of 007, which is, so and I'm not really I'm not into the whole take a photo in the exact position as Bond in some scene. But yeah, it did get to me going up to Chiltern. You sort of you got there, and it's a wonderful place.
And what about location that you haven't been to but you'd like to visit?
I'd like to visit the Bond 25 location when they're I don't know. I'd love to go to Japan. I've never been to Japan. Even I do like quite a lot of traveling for work, and I've never been there. I've never been to Thailand. Sorry, Tom. I've never been to James Bond Island. I'm not sure I really want to go with all the tourists there these days, but I think Japan's probably the one place. I missed out last year when they all went on there. They all went, but I'd like to go. Yeah, definitely Japan. I can't really think of any that I haven't been to.
Nice.
Well, I haven't been to the Bahamas. I haven't been to. This all the nice places. I don't really want to go to London. It's
yeah, for sure. No, that's the James Bond Island thing. The trick is if you get a private boat to take you out there, which isn't that expensive. Everything's pretty cheap over in Thailand, but if you get there before 9 a.m, so that's what I did the last time I went. We got a private boat to take us there, crack of dawn. We were in the boat before the sun had even risen, and we got there, and we were literally the only people on the island apart from one dude who was wandering around for some reason to set up the stalls or whatever. So yeah, little knick-knack was there, and that's definitely the way to do it, because if you go with the other tours, it's like you're shoulder to shoulder with people, really. But yeah, good stuff.
He was a boy mine, wasn't he, that knick-knack?
He was, absolutely.
He was a lad. I watched that an evening with Hervé Villechaize. Yeah, it was a good program, but he was a boy. He was, man. He was a
little character, wasn't he, to say the least? Absolutely. So
Roger always tells the stories as well. Yeah.
So
brilliant.
Next question then: where did it all start for you with Bond? Like, what's your earliest memory? When did the little flame of being a super fan ignite for you?
Spy Love Me, definitely the. Spy Love Me. Oh. Sorry. Definitely the Spy Love Me. That was the first. That was definitely the first. As soon as I watched the Spy Love Me, then I found out I read the Spy Love Me novelisation, and then I went out and bought the Fleming books, and I didn't realise at the time. Obviously, the Spy Love Me novelisation it was different. It was a good book, actually. You reviewed it not so long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so probably about 77, 78. And then, like I said, that 2 year anticipation between Spy and Moonraker when I went out and I went out and bought the books. We got on holiday and there'd always be a Bond book in the second-hand bookshop, and I'd pick one up if I hadn't seen it. And then we'd watch. There were double bills. There were so really between 77 and 79, that's when I really got into it.
So was it just a case of you went to see the film and it just really grabbed you? Was there anybody that like introduced you to it? Was like Spy Love Me is a great film, let's go and watch that. You need to get into Bond or anything like that?
No, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I had a friend who sadly is no longer with us, and he came back one day and said, I used to go to the cinema. Growing up in Birmingham when we didn't really have any money, going to the cinema was a big thing. All through the summer holidays, I'd probably go and watch films. There'd be some sad double bill on, or there'd be the Empire of the Ants and Watch Out We're Mad and stuff like that. I remember the irrelevant things. And then he just came back to me one day and said, I've just seen this film with this big guy called Jaws with big massive teeth. It's a James Bond film. Obviously, we knew James Bond was. And he just said, come and he said, we're going to go see it again. Do you want to come and see it? And I didn't have any money. So I went up there and they paid to go in. And as they paid to go in, I sort of like stood with them and just sneaked in. And from the moment I saw that when that Union Jack opened everybody clapped. It was crazy. It was brilliant. It was, and from then I was like, I like this.
I want some more of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then I want some more of that. Yeah, and then you find out, then you sort of find out that there's others, but they're different quality and different actors, and and then and then all of a sudden I heard about this guy Lazenby, and I think, well, who the hell's he? I know Sean Connery, I know Roger Moore. Who's this Lazenby guy? He was crazy, but back 77, 78, yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Some of the people we've interviewed, their first exposure to Bond was, say, the GoldenEye Nintendo game or whatever it was. And it's like they didn't really know Bond was a thing, and they played this video game. I was like, I like this. Oh, there's a film of this. All right, I'm going to explore that. And then, hold on a minute, this isn't the only one. And then, oh shit, there's a whole series. It's been going on for years. It's funny how, like, you just would never get that these days, would you? You just... It's so everywhere, and media is so everywhere in the palm of everybody's hand. You don't get that like element of discovery anymore, do you? Do you know what I mean? It's. I remember for me, one of the things for me was I'd always heard that there was this book called Colonel Sun that was out that wasn't Ian Fleming, and I'd never seen it in a bookshop. I'd never read it, didn't know what it was about or anything, and it was just like you couldn't find it back when I was a kid. It just wasn't anywhere because it was obviously out of print back then. And then I remember going into a charity shop on the Isle of Wight and seeing it on the shelf and being like, oh my God, there it is. It was just this like glowing golden thing. And I remember buying it immediately. It cost me like probably 99p. Ran home and just devoured it cover to cover. It was just this new bit of Bond that it was just this like hidden thing. And it's such a shame these days. The kids these days don't even know they're Bond, do they?
Oh, I was laughing at your last podcast because you were talking about kids these days, and I thought, bloody hell, if you two guys are talking about kids, what does that make me? It's funny when late 70s, early 80s, there was only really, these days you could pretty much go into WH Smith and you'll see some kind of book on Bond, and you could choose to buy it or not to buy it. But back then, there was only really the James Bond films and James Bond in the cinema. And then Raymond's book came out about 84, I don't know, around 84-ish. So. But there was nothing, if you either read the books or, there were toys, and I was never into the toys. I used to collect the posters and the film posters, and in the old days, I used to collect autographs. But now the fun's gone out of it now. The fun's gone out of collecting because it's just saturated market. They're even producing replication box for your Aston Martin, 1960s Aston Martin, just so it looks like it's brand new in the box. It's a shame these days, and even social media, you can't just go watch a film. It's impossible. I think it was Skyfall. I tried to stay away from social media, and I tried to stay away from everything, so I didn't know anything, and I still knew things about the film when it was on. Yeah. It's impossible to stay away from it. And it's a shame because it just takes away that element of surprise. You say GoldenEye. When GoldenEye came out, what an event! I was fortunate to see the press show before we went to the premiere, But what an event, Bond was back, and it was literally, he'd been gone. And I love Dalton as Bond. I just don't. Dalton as Bond, and I didn't really mention Dalton as Bond, but I love The Living Daylights. License to Kill is fabulous. It's got a sentimental place for me because it was the first premiere I went to with my spiky hair and my moustache, 22-year-old moustache that I couldn't grow. But it was a fabulous film, License to Kill. But I just never thought that Dalton, even though he was close to the Fleming of the books, I never thought he got it. He just didn't have it. And if you look at Craig now, and I think Craig is more of the Bond of the books than anybody. People say about Dalton, I just think it's because he looks like Bond, the Bond of the books, because he's tall, he's got dark hair. Whereas Craig is so much better as an actor, as a Bond, and I think, and I think because of that, I actually think Brosnan gets a bit of a raw deal. He's just, he did GoldenEye, and then he was unfortunate that his film sort of went downhill faster than Willie Bogner Jr. It was
fair play, absolutely. Nicely done there. So, final question then, before we wrap it up. What do you want to see from Bond 25? If you sit down, Valentine's Day 2020, you sit down to watch Bond 25, what would make the perfect final Bond film for Daniel for you?
Gemma Atherton naked.
Strawberry Fields back from the dead. She was Blofeld all along.
I want to see. I'd really like to see the You Only Live Twice story told up to date. It seems that we're going to get that. The fact that they've got the Madeleine Swan character coming back. I'd be very surprised if they didn't go down that route.
Yeah.
I want it to be a non-technology, non-technophobe, no Scooby Gang. M's in his office, Moneypenny's, chained to a desk, or Q doing what he does. I don't mind that, but I just want to see Bond out being a spy, and or even out for revenge or whatever. But I want to see. I don't want to. It doesn't need to be 3 hours long either. Just bring it back. Just cut the chaff out of it. Let's just let's have a good Daniel's last. I'm actually hoping they finished. If they did it, they finished the film like they finished the book, because it sort of opens up that question then, because then obviously they'll have to reboot or not or whatever. Yeah. So I'm hoping for that. Whether they'll do that, whether that's a 60s story, whether it can be updated, you don't know. But saying that, who said Casino Royale? They said that was unfilmable. Look at it.
Completely.
And I think the interesting thing with that as well is the various ways it could go in terms of Blofeld, in terms of Madeleine Swan, and I think either way it's going to be a bang out of a film. They are going to go all out, I imagine, on it. But yeah, the ending, how they're going to end it with Daniel, I think that is probably one of the most intriguing things as to what they're going to do.
Well, I always thought they'd kill him off. I thought that he's the sort of person that would want his Bond to end by being killed off, and I don't see why they can't do that.
No. Do you know what? When they did The Dark Knight Rises, and I thought the end to that could have been so great. The fact that the bomb goes off, Batman's dead, but then the spirit of Batman lives on, and then you hint that the little Robin dude has discovered the Batcave, and you leave the rest out to your imagination. I thought that was such a cool way to end it, with the statue of Batman there and all that. But then that silly little bit at the end where Alfred sees him sitting there having his lunch or whatever. And I'm like, if you'd have just stuck to your guns and actually killed him off, that would have been such a great way to end that series. And do you know what? There's a big part of me that's like, I wouldn't want to see Bond die. But then there's a part of me that's like, fuck, man, if they did it in the right way, that would be a really interesting way to go out, and then the perfect way to reboot. Because ultimately, when you think about it, we've often said, as a Bond goes through his tenure, he gets more fantastical as it goes along. His last film is, not as good as the first one. It goes downhill a bit, and then when the next dude comes along, it's like, right, let's take it back to Fleming. Let's, it's not as fantastical. It's going back to the roots. And then with Daniel, he's so sort of Fleming-y. I don't think you can do that yet, unless they make Bond 25 super fantastical, in which case then you could. But that would be a nice way to top it off as well. If you killed Bond off in Bond 25, and then it's a complete fresh slate, because he's on a totally different timeline. There's no Tracy, there's none of that baggage. Daniel's baggage is Vesper, obviously, and probably Madeline after the next one. So it's kind of like, that would be a good reboot for the next dude. I just don't know. There's a part of me that's like, that would be such a fucking bummer to come out of Bond 25 having him killed off, man. It would be like,
you'd have Bond fans slitting their wrists all over the country, all over the world. Yeah. I actually think that the whatever happens, the changes afoot for the one after Bond 25. I think this is the last conventional Bond film that Eon will do. I think there'll be something will happen after this, because you know, at the end of the day, Barbara and Michael have got the love for the franchise, and you know, I'm sure their siblings, you know, I'm sure they do too, because it's a moneymaker. But it would surprise me if something happened that completely radical after Bond 25. You know, but we will. The thing is, what I don't like, but I appreciate the fact that they have to do it, is I don't like this long wait. You know, they used to chuck out films every 5 minutes in the 60s, and they were all bloody good, weren't they? Although they had better source material. You know, it's funny. I would like to see a remake, just to see how it works. Just one remake of a.
Of which one? Which one would you opt for? If you were the person given that choice and you had to choose a remake, what film would you choose?
Doctor No.
Doctor No.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
that's
and I choose it because it's visually stunning, and it would still be visually stunning. I think it's a simple story. It's a simple, you know, it's a simple pretense. It wouldn't actually. You could do it relatively cheap, or you know, or cheaper. But I think Doctor No. Or it's funny. Or Live and Let Die, the book. You know, the book of Live and Let Die and Doctor No. You know, one of those. Just film them. You know, a remake. Well, let's put it like this: the Casino Royale was definitely better than the '67 one.
That's true.
And I'm not even going to say it again.
If there was one that needed a remake, it was that one for sure. Absolutely. Cool. Well, it's been a lot of fun, man.
Well,
It's been a lot of fun having you on the show today, man. It's I always thought, as soon as we saw your name pop out of the hat, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. We're going to get some good bands out of this.
No, thank you, guys. I've just got to ask Chris, have you seen The Rocketeer yet?
I have not.
Mate,
I know, man. Like you, I'm a massive indie fan as well, and it's meant to have this adventure. And everyone has told me, but I tell you what, before I next see you, I will make sure I watch The Rocketeer.
It's so up your street, mate. It really is so up your street. When you made me watch Where Eagles Dare, because I hadn't seen that you knocked the tail on the donkey there for me, and it's the same going to be for The Rocketeer, man. You've got to watch that. It's like indie.
I saw Where Eagles Dare on the big screen at the BFI last week with Mr. Ashby.
Yeah.
Oh, what a film! When you watch it on the big screen, and you know, you just capture those little elements of a film that I've seen 50 times on the small screen, and just little things. And you know, Richard Burton's performance in that was wonderful. You know, and the man's got the hairiest hands I've ever seen in my life. If ever it comes on, guys, you got to check it. You check these films out on the big screen. You know, it's the only way to watch them. That's why I love the Prince Charles Cinema, and I don't mind giving them a plug here. It's because they bring the films to the theatre, and we go and watch them. We watched Last Crusade, and you know, and I watched all the indies there not so long back. It was wonderful.
Well, next time they do the Bond marathon back to back, because I know they did it. Either they did it a second time, or they're planning to. I think I'm going to get a piece of that action. I think and get on it.
Nice.
Yeah, I asked them to change the films actually, because they did it the second time around, but they showed the same films, and I'm
which is strange.
What's the point? You know, maybe they only had a license. Although it was quite funny when you watch the 6 movies like that. That the quality. So Goldfinger was first. It's not my favourite Connery. It's magical. Then there was On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which you know was a bit long compared to Goldfinger after. And then you got into Spy, and then you got Daylights, and it was a bit flat, I must admit. And then GoldenEye came back on. It was wonderful. And I didn't stop thinking the Casino Royale. I need to get back, but you know, obviously it's pretty fresh in the mind anyway. So
I think a lot of people had said something similar to you with Daylights, but I think it would have been interesting had it been a different order. How that would have affected it, maybe in reverse order or whatever. Obviously they'd never do that, but it just would have made things interesting to see how it would have worked out.
I sat next to Ian Davis when I went to see that, and he said, I remember the car going into the shed but I don't remember it coming out. He just fell asleep, and we woke him up at the end.
Nicely done.
He had the midnight out. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So it was the top one.
Yeah,
nicely done.
Stuff.
Cool, mate. But it's been great having you, man. I always knew this would be a good chat, and it turned out to be a good one. So thanks, man.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work, guys. Take care, yeah?
Cheers.
Cool.
Nice one. Take it easy. Bye, Dave.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Well, I think there we have it, Chris. We have our new category, which is your dirty bitch Bond girl. I think that has to be a regular part of the show from now on. I insist.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. You want to marry or your dirty bitch Bond girl. I love it. So good.
I love
so
it as
good.
well.
But it was brilliant speaking to Dave. Just I think he that sort of time where the Bond fan community was probably coming together for the very first time. You think mid 80s, you would have obviously had Bond fans around the world, and perhaps in the 60s you've had the Bond phenomenon, maybe conventions and stuff, but the whole Bond fan community. And there was that period where Bond wasn't cool. Bond is cool now, and I think in the 80s it was kind of a bit overlooked. But Dave was there in that time where the Bond fan sort of community really got together, and that convention that everyone talks about in Pinewood 1990 or 91 or whenever it was, 1990 I think. And imagine going to that, seeing other Bond fans for the first time, obviously no internet, nothing like that, and thinking, wow, okay, here we have some fellow Bond fans. Not only that, but then seeing all these props that Dave mentioned, from vehicles from the Bond films, and getting to catalogue it and move it around, and it's sitting in it. Got to sit in Little Nelly and all that sort of stuff. That's incredible, isn't it?
It is incredible, and it's crazy what a different world it is these days from the invention of the mobile phone, where everything and the internet, obviously anything can be leaked onto the internet in a heartbeat. Back in the day, you imagine you're walking along the street and all of a sudden you just happen across a Bond set and they're filming. It's like chances are you wouldn't have had a camera on you, so it's like nobody worried. And it's like you could just stroll in. Hello, Daniel. How's it going, mate? You know what I mean? And and that's it. And there would have just been no security or anything. So it's probably a little bit of security, but no kind of not like when you go to Pinewood these days and you're kind of like locked down and not allowed to go into this area. Nobody would have cared, So it's great to kind of hear those stories from that kind of period. Like there's a like we've often said, like a magical time before the internet where everything was instantly accessible, where you had to follow those almost like a treasure map to finding other Bond films and discovering that who's this Australian dude that played Bond, who's this other guy, this Sean Connery fella, I thought Roger Moore was James Bond, and that whole little breadcrumb trail of discovery that just all of that is a Google search away these days, and you'll know everything. And there's definitely there's a bit of magic in that is just gone forever these days. As convenient as it all is, there's some magic to that level of discovery.
It would be nice to somehow go back to it all. I know it's impossible, or to literally, I guess the closest you could get would be to move to some remote island where there's no internet, just stay there until Bond comes out and then go and watch it without hearing anything. Obviously that's so hard to do these days, but I guess that's the closest, isn't it? But,
absolutely.
There we go. Well, that's like the first round of Bond interviews done then.
Indeed it is. Absolutely. So thank you to Matt and Marlena and Dave for joining us, and also thank you to the JBR family. Thank you for sticking with us for so long. We're 5 years in now. I know there's a number of you who've been with us from pretty much day one with the first episode all the way back in February 2014. So thanks for sticking with us. We always appreciate it. It's lovely to see what JBR has grown into with the community aspect and everybody kind of making friends from the point of the podcast being a rallying point and people making friends and groups all over the world and stuff. It's I never dreamed it would become this 5 years ago when we first switched on the microphone and started talking about James Bond.
I think it would have been a bit strange if you had. But, no, same here. I mean, it's been a wicked 5 years, and equally, like, just what I really like is when you get a little news story on Facebook about, JBR Melbourne going to get a group together and watch a Bond, or JBR Philly or LA or any of the groups, South Coast Central, any of them, and when you see that something is going on, Bond fans are getting together, and that's pretty much what it's all about, isn't it? That is why we kind of do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah. That's long may it continue.
Indeed. I think there's something beautiful to be said about that in the sense, especially when you're an adult as well, because when you're a kid and you're at school and whatever, you're making friends left, right and center, and you're seeing people every day, and then you go off to college and you make a whole new set of friends, and then you go out into the real world and you get a job or whatever it is you do, and obviously you make another circle of friends and all that. And then there's a point when you kind of get past all that where it's like, shit, you're not making, like, you're not exposed to so many people like you would in those days. When you're at school, you're around 100 odd kids or whatever it is. And it's a beautiful thing to see friendships between grown men,
and
Chris,
women, and grown women.
Pardon me for saying so. Absolutely. Grown women as well, who are forming around something as wonderful as just loving James Bond. You know, it's a great thing. And I salute each and every one of you.
Definitely, absolutely. So, as always, we'll return next week with our second part of the JBR 5th anniversary fancast episode. Are you looking forward to seeing what the next round of interviews is?
Let's see, who have we got on the list? Oh, no. Oh, God, no. No, absolutely not. No, I think I might skip next week.
Yeah, we'll just not bother releasing it.
Absolutely. It's going to be good. We've got some good Bond chit chat coming up next week as well from 3 more JBR listeners. So make sure you tune in for that. James Bond Radio will return with the 5th anniversary fancast part 2.
We will indeed. So we'll see you next week, everyone.
Bye.